Hello there and welcome to Just About Earth, where curiosity gets cosy and the old stones of this planet are allowed to speak in their own slow time. Tonight our journey takes us north, farther north than many ancient stories usually ask us to go, to a place where the sea is never very far away, where the wind has a habit of arriving before you do, and where a circle of standing stones has waited for thousands of years on a low strip of land between two quiet lochs. This is the Ring of Brodgar, one of the great stone circles of Neolithic Britain, and one of those places that seems simple at first glance, until you stand still with it for a while. At first, it may look like a gathering of weathered stones in a field, tall slabs of sandstone, some upright, some broken, some missing, all arranged in a wide circle beneath the open sky. Sheep may graze nearby. Grass moves in the wind. The clouds pass over it as if they have been doing so forever. Nothing flashes, nothing explains itself. There are no carved instructions on the stone saying, this was for the moon, or this was for ceremony, or this was where people came when the year changed and the world felt uncertain. The Ring of Brodgar does not make its purpose obvious. It simply stands there, quiet and enormous, asking us to do something modern people are not always very good at doing. It asks us to slow down. And perhaps that is why it feels so perfect for a sleepy journey. A stone circle is not a machine rushing to finish its work. It is not a city with traffic, doors, voices and clocks. It is patient. It waits in rain and sunlight. It lets centuries pass over it without complaint. If a stone could sigh, the Stones of Brodgar might have done so each time another generation came, looked, guessed, wondered, and walked away with more questions than answers. They have survived storms, visitors, changing beliefs, and the long forgetfulness that covers so much of human history. They have watched the world become modern around them, which must be a strange experience for a stone, if stones are allowed to have experiences. And after all that, they are still there, holding their circle as if the shape itself mattered more than anything we can easily name. Before we wander deeper into that circle, I wonder where you are listening from tonight. Are you somewhere warm, with evening still bright beyond the window, or somewhere dark already, where the room has gone quiet and the day is almost finished? What time is it where you are right now? It is a fitting question, because ancient monuments like the Ring of Brodgar often make us think about time in a very different way. Not the time of schedules and alarms and messages waiting for replies, but the older kind of time, the time of sunrise and sunset, the time of seasons, the time of planting, gathering, remembering, burying, celebrating, and watching the sky change one slow pattern at a time. The people who built the Ring of Brodgar did not live by glowing screens or neatly printed calendars. Their days were shaped by weather, animals, crops, tides, darkness and light. Their world moved in cycles. Their year had a body. Winter could be felt in the bones. Summer could be stored in the ground. The sky was not just scenery. It was a clock, a map, and perhaps a kind of conversation. If you find this quiet journey soothing, or if ancient places help your thoughts settle after a long day, I would be truly grateful if you gave the video a like and maybe subscribed. It helps this small corner of calm reach others who might also enjoy drifting through the deep past one stone, one landscape, and one mystery at a time. And of course, I do hope the Ring of Brodgar is interesting enough to keep you company, but not so interesting that it keeps you awake. The stones have waited for around 5,000 years, so they will not mind if you rest before we reach the end. They are very patient listeners, probably better than most of us before morning coffee. So settle in, let your thoughts loosen a little, and picture the islands of Orkney. They sit off the northern coast of Scotland, surrounded by the Atlantic and the North Sea, a cluster of green and brown landforms set in cold, shifting water. Today, Orkney can feel remote to many visitors, but in the Neolithic world it was not a forgotten edge of nowhere. It was connected. Boats moved between islands and coasts. Ideas travelled with people, Stone, cattle, tools, stories and beliefs crossed water. The sea was not only a barrier, it was also a road, wide and moving, sometimes dangerous, sometimes generous. To imagine Orkney only as isolated is to miss something important. For the people who lived there thousands of years ago, these islands may have been a centre of life, contact, ritual, building, and shared meaning. That is one of the first surprises of the Ring of Brodgar. It is not standing alone in an empty landscape. It belongs to one of the richest Neolithic settings in Europe. Nearby are the Stones of Stenness, another ancient stone circle, older and smaller but no less powerful in presence. Not far away lies the great chambered tomb of Maesho, built with such care that the setting sun around midwinter can shine down its passage and touch the darkness inside. There is also the settlement of Barnhouse, where houses once stood close to the monuments, and the Ness of Brodgar, a remarkable complex of large stone buildings that has changed how many people think about Neolithic Orkney. This whole area, now known as the heart of Neolithic Orkney, is not a random collection of old remains. It is a landscape shaped by people who return to certain places again and again, building, rebuilding, gathering, and leaving behind traces of a world that was organised around more than simple survival. The Ring of Brodgar sits between the Loch of Harry and the Loch of Stenness, on a natural neck of land called the Ness of Brodgar. It is a position that seems carefully chosen. Water lies on both sides, hills rise in the distance, the sky opens wide overhead. On a clear day, the horizon feels broad and watchful, and on a windy day, which in Orkney is not exactly a rare event, the whole place can feel alive with movement, even though the stones themselves remain still. It is easy to imagine people approaching from different directions, perhaps walking from nearby settlements, perhaps coming by boat, perhaps arriving for gatherings whose purpose we can only partly understand. The land itself guides you there, narrowing between waters as if leading the feet toward the circle. And what a circle it must once have been. Today, many stones remain, but not all of them. Archaeologists believe the Ring of Brodgar may originally have contained around 60 standing stones, arranged in a great ring roughly 100 metres across. Even now, with gaps and broken stones, the scale is striking. It is one of the largest stone circles in Britain, and unlike some monuments that rise tall and compact, Brodgar spreads itself wide. You do not simply look at it, you enter the space of it. The circle makes a room out of the open air. There are no walls, no roof, no doorway in the usual sense. And yet the moment you step within it, the landscape feels arranged around you. That is one of the quiet powers of a stone circle. It changes the way you stand. A single standing stone can be impressive, of course. It can mark a place, catch the eye, make a human shape in a lonely field. But a circle does something different. A circle gathers attention inward while still leaving everything open to the sky. It creates a boundary without closing the world out. It lets people face one another, or face the centre, or face the horizon through the gaps. It can hold a crowd. It can hold silence. It can make a place feel separate without building a wall. The Ring of Brodgar does this on a grand scale, and it does it with stones that were brought from the local geology, shaped by human hands and raised with effort we should not underestimate. It is tempting when looking at ancient monuments to rush toward a single answer. What was it for? Was it a temple? Was it an observatory? Was it a meeting place? Was it a burial site? Was it a calendar? These are natural questions, and they are not wrong questions. But the trouble is that Neolithic monuments often seem to have carried several meanings at once. A place could be ceremonial and social. It could connect to the sky and to the dead. It could mark seasons and gather communities. It could be practical in one sense and deeply symbolic in another. Modern life often separates things into neat categories. Work happens here. Worship happens there. Eating happens in one place, politics in another, remembering in another. But ancient life may not have been divided so cleanly. A gathering at the Ring of Brodgar might have involved ritual, feasting, exchange, storytelling, decision-making, mourning, celebration, and watching the turning year, all woven together into one event. The stones may not have had one job, they may have held a whole world of human activity. Still, the question remains, and it is a powerful one. What was this giant stone circle really for? The honest answer is that we do not know with certainty. There is no surviving voice from the builders telling us what they believed. No written record explains why the stones were raised, but uncertainty does not mean emptiness. Archaeology gives us clues, the landscape gives us clues, the monuments nearby give us clues. The arrangement of the stones, the ditch around the circle, the relationship to water and sky, and the wider pattern of Neolithic Orkney all help us build a careful picture. Not a fantasy, not a perfect reconstruction, but a thoughtful approach to a place that still carries meaning even when some of that meaning has been lost. The Ring of Brodgar was built in a time when communities across Britain and Ireland were making extraordinary monuments. People were raising stones, building tombs, shaping earthworks, and creating places that required planning, cooperation, labour, and shared purpose. These were not casual projects. To quarry stone, move it, raise it, and arrange it into a great circle demanded time and effort from many people. It required knowledge of materials, land, balance, leverage, and probably a strong reason to keep going when the weather turned unpleasant, which in Orkney it surely did. Anyone who has tried to assemble flat-pack furniture on a calm afternoon may feel a mild respect for people who raised multi-ton stones in the wind without metal tools or modern machinery. The joke is small, but the achievement is enormous. And the achievement becomes even more interesting when we remember that the Ring of Brodgar is not just a ring of stones. Around it is a broad rock-cut ditch, a circular trench that would have made the monument even more dramatic when first created. Digging such a ditch through bedrock was not a simple task. It suggests that the builders wanted to define the space strongly. The circle was not only marked by upright stones, but also by a cut in the earth itself, stone above, hollow below, upright markers and surrounding boundary. The monument was shaped in height and depth, in presence and absence. A person approaching it may have been aware not only of the stones, but of crossing into a different kind of space. This idea of entering matters. Ancient monuments are often experienced by movement. You walk toward them, you pass along an approach, you cross a boundary, you turn your body, you see one feature line up with another, you notice what appears and disappears as you move. The Ring of Brodgar may have been designed not simply to be seen from one point, but to be experienced by people walking around it, entering it, standing within it, leaving it, returning to it. The circle may have shaped memory as much as space. A child brought there for the first time might have remembered the height of the stones, the sound of voices, the feeling of wind off the lochs, the faces of elders, the smell of animals, smoke, wet grass, or food prepared for a gathering. Long before written history, places themselves could become archives of human experience. The more we look at Brodgar, the more it resists being reduced to an ancient puzzle with a single missing piece. It is not just a riddle waiting for a neat answer. It is part of a lived landscape. People were born nearby, worked nearby, died nearby, and returned to these monuments across generations. The stones may have connected them to ancestors, to land, to seasons, to groups beyond their own settlement, and to powers they believed moved through the world. Whether those powers were gods, spirits, ancestors, sky cycles, or something we do not have words for, the monuments suggest that the builders cared deeply about placing human life inside a larger order. There is something strangely moving about that, because even now, thousands of years later, we still do something similar. We still mark important moments with places. We still gather in circles around tables, fires, graves, stages, and quiet rooms. We still travel to landscapes that make us feel part of something older or larger than ourselves. We still look at the sky when we need perspective, even if we now know more about stars than the builders of Brodgar could have known in a scientific sense. Knowledge changes, but the impulse to stand beneath the open sky and wonder does not seem to leave us. Maybe that is why the Ring of Brodgar feels so alive in the imagination. It belongs to people very distant from us in time, and yet the questions it raises are not distant at all. How do communities hold together? How do people remember the dead? How do they measure the year? How do they turn ordinary land into meaningful land? How do they make a place where the human world and the wider world seem to meet? These are not small questions. They are the kind of questions that sit quietly beneath daily life, like stones under grass. For tonight, we will not rush to solve the Ring of Brodgar too quickly. We will approach it slowly, the way someone might approach the circle itself across the Orkney ground. First, we will look at the islands that held it, because place matters. Then we'll step closer to the stones and consider their shape, scale and setting. We will wander through the world of Neolithic Orkney, where houses, tombs, circles and great buildings formed a landscape of remarkable ambition. We will think about the people who may have gathered there, what they might have seen, what they might have heard, and why a circle of stone could matter enough to be built at such scale. We will look up as well toward the sun, the moon, and the wide northern sky, because many ancient monuments seem to invite that upward glance. And all along the way, we will keep one careful thought in mind. The past does not become more respectful when we pretend to know everything. Sometimes the most honest way to listen to an ancient place is to let it remain partly mysterious. So now, imagine the wind moving low over the grass. Imagine water on either side, grey or silver depending on the light. Imagine the stones ahead, some tall, some leaning, all weathered by centuries of rain and salt air. There is no need to hurry. The path into the story is open, and the circle has been waiting a very long time. To understand the Ring of Brodgar, we have to spend a little time with the islands around it, because the stones did not rise in an empty place. They were not placed on a random patch of northern ground by people who happened to have some spare afternoons and a strong interest in very heavy landscaping. They belonged to Orkney, and Orkney shaped them. The land, the sea, the weather, the stone beneath people's feet, the long summer light, the dark winter days, the lochs, the birds, the cattle, the boats, all of it mattered. Before we can ask why a great circle was built, we have to ask what kind of world could make such a circle seem necessary. Orkney sits just beyond the northern edge of mainland Scotland, close enough to be part of Britain, but far enough away to feel like a different conversation with the earth. It is not a single island, but a group of islands spread across cold water, some broad and low, some smaller and more exposed, some now lived on, others quiet with only birds, grass and ruins for company. The largest island is called Mainland, which can sound slightly confusing if you have just arrived by boat and thought you'd already left the mainland behind. But names often carry local logic, and in Orkney, mainland simply means the main island of the group, the place where many of the most famous prehistoric monuments still stand. The landscape is not dramatic in the way some mountain ranges are dramatic. It does not tower above you with sharp peaks and deep forests. Much of Orkney is open, low and wide, with rolling farmland, wet grass, stone walls, shallow lochs, and long views toward the horizon. The drama comes from exposure. The sky feels large there. Weather does not sneak in politely. It arrives with confidence. Clouds move quickly. Rain can pass through and leave behind sudden light. Wind can press against the body until standing still becomes a small negotiation. On some days the sea is grey and restless. On others it catches silver light and looks almost calm, though it is probably best not to trust it too much. Seas around northern islands have a way of looking peaceful right before reminding everyone who is in charge. This open landscape matters because monuments like the Ring of Brodgar are not only stone objects. They're also arrangements of view, movement, sound, and weather. A stone circle in a closed forest would feel one way. A stone circle in a desert would feel another. A stone circle between lochs, beneath a wide northern sky, with hills in the distance and water on two sides, becomes something else entirely. The Ring of Brodgar belongs to a world where the horizon is always present. When people stood there thousands of years ago, they were not simply looking at stones. They were seeing stones against sky, stones beside water, stones in relation to other monuments, stones in a place where the land itself seemed to pause between two bodies of water. For Neolithic people, Orkney was not remote in the same way we might imagine it today. Modern maps can trick us. We look at Orkney near the top of Britain and think, far away, edge of the map, end of the road. But for people who moved by water, islands were not necessarily isolated. The sea could be dangerous, yes, but it could also connect communities more easily than rough land. A boat could carry people, animals, goods, tools, stories and ideas. Waterways were highways long before roads were laid across the land. In a world of boats, Orkney may have been not an edge, but a meeting place. A place where routes crossed. A place where people looked outward as much as inward. That changes how we imagine the builders of Brodgar. They were not a lonely group cut off from the rest of the world, piling stones in the wind because there was nothing else to do. They belonged to a wider Neolithic world. They farmed, built houses, raised animals, exchanged materials, watched the seasons, buried their dead, and created monuments that required organisation and shared belief. The evidence from Orkney shows people with skill, patience, and a strong sense of place. Their buildings were not careless shelters. Their tombs were carefully made. Their pottery was shaped and decorated. Their settlements had structure. Their monuments were placed in relation to one another in ways that still make archaeologists stop, measure, question, and occasionally scratch their heads in the rain. Life in Neolithic Orkney was not easy, but it was far from primitive in the lazy sense that word is sometimes used. People lived close to weather and land. They raised cattle and sheep. They grew crops such as barley. They gathered resources from the shore. They used stone, bone, wood when they could get it, and other materials available to them. Orkney did not have much woodland, which meant timber was limited, and that may be one reason stone became so central to building. When wood is scarce but workable stone is nearby, the land quietly encourages a certain kind of architecture. Houses could be built from stone, tombs could be built from stone, furniture could even be made of stone. At Skara Brae, the famous Neolithic village on the west coast of mainland, stone beds, stone dressers and stone storage spaces still survive in ways that make the ancient rooms feel almost strangely domestic. You can look at them and think, someone lived here, someone slept here, someone placed things on that shelf, someone came inside out of the wind and wanted a home to be warm, useful and familiar. That is one of the remarkable things about Orkney. It does not offer only grand monuments, it also offers traces of ordinary life. And when ordinary life and extraordinary monuments exist close together, the past becomes more complete. The Ring of Brodgar was not built by mysterious shadows who appeared only for ceremonies and then vanished. It was built by people who ate, worked, argued, laughed, repaired roofs, cared for animals, worried about weather, and probably had strong opinions about things that would sound both ancient and very familiar. Someone had to prepare food, someone had to shape stone tools, someone had to look after children, someone had to decide when to move cattle, someone had to notice when a wall needed fixing, and at certain times perhaps those same people gathered at monuments where daily life seemed to open into something larger. The heart of Neolithic Orkney is a name given today to a group of major sites, but the heart part feels appropriate. Within a relatively small area are Skara Brae, Meshu, the Stones of Stenness, and the Ring of Brodgar. Nearby, the Ness of Brodgar has revealed a complex of large Neolithic buildings that has made the whole landscape even more fascinating. These places were not all built at exactly the same moment, and they did not all serve the same purpose. But together they show that this area mattered deeply for a very long time. People came back to it. They added to it. They changed it. They remembered it. The land became layered with meaning. Think of how a modern town can grow around certain important places. A church, a market square, a bridge, a cemetery, an old road, a meeting hall. Each one gathers memory. People give directions by them. Families connect stories to them. Events happen there and become part of local identity. Now take away writing, maps, phones, street signs and printed records. In such a world, places themselves become even more important as anchors of memory. A stone circle could hold knowledge not in words, but in repeated gatherings, stories told aloud, movements through space, and ceremonies carried from one generation to the next. The Ring of Brodgar may have been part of that kind of memory system, not in the modern sense of a coded machine, but as a place where people knew who they were by returning to where they had been. The islands themselves would have helped shape that sense of belonging. Orkney is surrounded by water, and water has a way of making land feel defined. On a mainland, distance can stretch endlessly. On an island, the edges are always known. You may not see the whole coast at once, but you understand that land has a boundary. You understand that leaving requires crossing. You understand that arrivals matter. A boat appearing on the water is not just movement, it is news. It may bring relatives, visitors, trade, danger, marriage partners, stories, or objects from elsewhere. In such a setting, gatherings could take on extra importance. People from different parts of the islands may have come together at certain seasons, perhaps to renew ties, exchange animals, share food, arrange relationships, settle disputes, honour ancestors, or take part in rituals whose details are now out of reach. The weather would also have played its part. Modern visitors often experience Orkney as beautiful, but also changeable. The Neolithic people knew that much more intimately. Weather was not a background mood, it shaped survival. A bad season could mean hunger. Too much rain, too much wind, poor harvests, sick animals, rough seas, these were serious matters. When your life depends on cycles you cannot control, you pay attention. You watch the sky. You remember patterns. You mark changes. You learn the behaviour of birds, tides, clouds and light. You understand that the year is not just a number. It is a living sequence of risks and opportunities. This is where stone, sea and sky begin to meet in a more practical sense. Stone gave people durable places. Sea connected them and fed them, but also threatened them. Sky gave light, weather, direction, and seasonal order. A great monument in such a landscape may have helped bring those forces together in human terms. The Ring of Brodgar did not control the weather, of course. It did not make crops grow by itself. But it may have helped people gather at the right moments, remember the cycles that mattered, and place their lives within a pattern larger than a single household or farm. That may sound simple, but it is not. Holding a community together over generations is one of the hardest tasks humans have ever faced. Sometimes it takes laws, sometimes it takes stories, sometimes it takes shared meals, and sometimes, perhaps, it takes a circle of stones large enough that no one can pretend they built it alone. There is another important thing about Orkney. The stones were already part of the land before they became monuments. The builders did not import mystery from nowhere. They worked with local sandstone, with slabs that could be quarried, shaped, dragged, lifted and set upright. The geology made certain choices possible. Stone in Orkney often splits into useful flat slabs, which is one reason Neolithic buildings there could be so carefully constructed. When you look at the Ring of Brodgar, you're looking at the land rearranged by human hands. The stones came from the earth nearby, and were raised into a new relationship with sky. That transformation may have mattered. A slab lying in the ground is part of geology. A slab standing upright in a circle becomes part of human meaning. There is something very direct about that act. To raise a stone is to change how a place behaves. It catches light differently. It casts a shadow. It can be seen from a distance. It gives people a point to gather around. It may align with other features, or simply mark presence. It says, someone did this here, and if the stone remains after the builders die, it continues saying that long after the original voices are gone. In Orkney, where wind and rain can wear at almost everything, stone offered a kind of endurance. Not perfect endurance, because stones fall, crack, lean, and weather away, but enough endurance to outlast houses, names, and spoken explanations. The people who built the monuments of Orkney may have understood that endurance in their own way. They lived among tombs where the dead were placed in stone chambers. They built houses of stone. They raised stones in open places. Stone connected the living, the dead, and the landscape. It was not only a material, it may have carried a sense of permanence, ancestry, and authority. When a community invests labour into stone, it is often making a statement that reaches beyond immediate need. A wooden fence may keep animals out. A storage pit may hold grain. But a huge stone circle with a surrounding ditch is doing something else. It is asking to be remembered. Still, we should be careful not to imagine the islands as solemn all the time. Ancient ritual landscapes were not necessarily quiet in the way museum galleries are quiet. They may have been noisy, crowded, smoky, and alive. People may have brought animals. They may have cooked and eaten. Children may have run about. Dogs may have barked. Someone may have been late. Someone may have complained about the wind, because surely complaining about the weather is an ancient human tradition, and in Orkney there would have been plenty of material. Sacred does not always mean silent. A meaningful place can be full of movement. A ceremony can include laughter. A gathering can be both serious and social. The Ring of Brodgar may have known grief, but it may also have known feasting. It may have known formal rites, but also gossip. Human beings rarely keep these things completely separate. This is one reason the nearby Ness of Brodgar is so important for understanding the wider setting. Excavations there have uncovered evidence of large buildings, decorated stones, pottery, hearths, and signs of repeated activity. The scale and richness of the site suggest that the area between the Stones of Stenness and the Ring of Brodgar was a major focus of Neolithic life. It was not just a path between monuments. It was a busy ceremonial and social landscape in its own right. When we imagine people moving toward Brodgar, we should not imagine them crossing empty land without context. They may have passed places already full of meaning, structures where people gathered, worked, prepared, or performed activities connected to the monuments around them. There is also Maeshowe, the great chambered tomb not far away, one of the most impressive Neolithic tombs in northern Europe. Its passage and chamber were built with remarkable care, and its relationship to winterlight has drawn attention for generations. The setting sun around midwinter can shine along its entrance passage, entering a place made for the dead, or at least for ancestral remains and ceremonies connected to them. Whether we call that astronomy, ritual, architecture, or all three at once, it shows a close attention to light and time. The people of Neolithic Orkney were not merely building heavy things, they were building with awareness of the world around them. The Stones of Stenness too stand close by, older than the Ring of Brodgar and more compact. Today only a few great stones remain, but they are enough to make the place feel powerful. When seen together, Stenness and Brodgar suggest a landscape where circles and standing stones were part of a long tradition. The later Ring of Brodgar may have responded to earlier monuments. It may have expanded an existing sacred geography. It may have created a larger gathering place in relation to older sites. We cannot know all the intentions, but we can see that the area was not built in a single burst and then abandoned. It developed over time. One generation inherited what another had made and then added its own work. That inheritance is important. The builders of Brodgar may have been looking backward as well as forward. They may have known older monuments as ancestral places, already ancient in their own time. This is something we often forget. When we say the Ring of Brodgar is ancient, we're thinking from our own perspective. But to the people who built it, some nearby monuments may already have carried generations of memory. They were not starting with a blank landscape. They were adding to a place already shaped by the dead, by stories, and by earlier acts of building. In that sense, Brodgar may have been both new and traditional, both an innovation and a continuation. The natural setting would have made all of this more striking. The lochs around the Ness of Brodgar are not just decorative background. The Loch of Harray and the Loch of Stenness create a watery frame around the land where the monuments stand. The Loch of Stenness connects to the sea, bringing saltwater influence into the landscape, while Harray is freshwater. Even if Neolithic people did not describe them in modern scientific terms, they would have known the difference through use, taste, fish, birds, and daily experience. The narrow land between these waters may have felt like a threshold, a place between different elements, fresh and salt, land and water, living settlements and places of ceremony, the ordinary and the set apart. Threshold places often attract meaning. River crossings, hilltops, caves, shorelines, springs, and islands have mattered to human communities all over the world. They are places where categories meet. The Ring of Brodgar stands in such a place. Not on a high mountain, not hidden underground, but in an open zone between waters, where sky and horizon are part of the experience. It is easy to understand why people might have felt that this was a fitting place to gather, even if we cannot fully translate their reasons into our words. At night, the experience would have changed completely. Modern darkness is rarely complete, with streetlights, windows, car headlights, and the faint glow of devices. Neolithic darkness in Orkney would have been deeper, though not empty. Fires, stars, moonlight, and reflected water would have shaped what people saw. The stones may have appeared as dark forms against a paler sky, or vanished into blackness until one stood close to them. The moon over the lochs, the movement of stars, the short nights of summer, the long darkness of winter, all of these would have been part of the monument's world. A stone circle does not close when the sun sets, it becomes another place. And in winter, when daylight was brief and the weather could be harsh, gathering may have taken on special weight. Communities living through northern winters needed food, cooperation, and confidence that the cycle would turn again. Midwinter was not merely a date, it was a real condition, a time when darkness reached its strength and then began slowly to loosen. Monuments connected to seasonal light may have helped people mark that turning. Whether the Ring of Brodgar itself was used in precise sky watching or not, it stood in a landscape where the movements of the sun and moon mattered. To live there was to notice light. By now, the islands begin to look less like a backdrop and more like an active part of the mystery. Orkney gave the builders stone that could be worked. It gave them open horizons where the sky could be watched. It gave them waterways that connected communities. It gave them weather that made seasonal knowledge essential. It gave them limited timber, encouraging a stone-built world. It gave them a landscape where tombs, houses, and circles could stand in visible relationship with one another. The Ring of Brodgar came from this combination. It was not simply dropped into Orkney. It grew out of Orkney, out of its materials, its challenges, and its possibilities. That may be why the monument still feels so rooted. Some ancient sites feel as if they dominate their surroundings. Brodgar feels more like it belongs to them. The stones do not conquer the landscape. They converse with it. They frame bits of water, hill and sky. They change as weather changes. In mist they can seem withdrawn. In low sunlight they become sharp and warm. Under heavy clouds they look older, more severe. With sheep around them they become almost domestic, though in a slightly odd way, like very serious guests at a farm meeting. The mood shifts, but the circle remains. For the people who first raised those stones, the islands were home, not a romantic postcard, not an archaeological zone. Home, a place of work, memory, danger, comfort, and obligation. That is the world we need to keep in mind as we move closer to the ring itself. The Great Circle was part of a living island landscape. built by people whose hands knew stone, whose eyes knew the weather, whose lives were shaped by water, and whose communities found reasons to make certain places matter beyond the span of one lifetime. So let the view widen for a moment before it narrows again. See Orkney as a scatter of islands in northern water. See the low fields and the lochs. See smoke rising from stone houses. See cattle moving through damp grass. See boats drawn up on shore or crossing between islands. See people watching clouds because clouds mattered. See children growing up among monuments already old. See the winter sun sliding low, the summer evening lingering, the moon lifting over water, and the stones waiting in the distance. The Ring of Brodgar is still ahead of us, but now it is no longer alone. It stands within a world of stone, sea, and sky, and that world is the first key to understanding why anyone would build a circle so large that even after 5,000 years, we are still walking toward it. To enter the Ring of Brodgar, even in imagination, it helps not to rush straight into the middle. The circle was not made for rushing. It sits in a landscape that seems to slow the body down before the stones are even reached. You approach across open ground, with the lochs lying low on either side and the sky spread wide overhead. The wind may be moving across the grass. Birds may be calling somewhere near the water. The stones stand ahead in a broken ring, not crowded together, not hidden behind walls, but spaced out in a way that lets the whole landscape pass through them. They do not block the view, they hold it. At first, the Ring of Brodgar can seem almost modest, especially if someone arrives expecting something like a fortress or a pyramid. It does not rise as one massive structure. It does not have towers, carvings, stairways, or a grand entrance with stone lions looking sternly at visitors. It is simply a circle of upright stones on a low piece of land in Orkney. But that first impression changes as you come closer. The size begins to reveal itself. The stones are spread across a wide circle, and the space inside them feels larger than it looked from a distance. The monument does not impress by piling stone upward. It impresses by gathering space. That may be one of the first things to notice. The Ring of Brodgar is not only made of stones, it is made of the gaps between them. The openings matter, the views through the circle matter, the way a person moves around it matters. If you stand outside and look in, you see stones framing the interior. If you stand within it, the stones frame the surrounding world. Water, hills, sky, grass, and passing weather all become part of the monument. The builders did not create a closed room. They created an open one, a place where the land could be arranged without being shut away. Today, visitors usually enter casually, walking along a path, perhaps with a camera, a jacket zipped against the wind, and a practical concern about whether the weather will hold for another 10 minutes. The ancient approach was probably different. We do not know exactly how people entered the circle 5,000 years ago, or whether everyone entered in the same way. There may have been preferred routes. There may have been times when only certain people went inside. There may have been ceremonies in which movement around the ring mattered as much as arrival at the centre. But even now, with modern paths and modern expectations, crossing into the circle creates a small change in feeling. There is a wide ditch around the Ring of Brodgar, though today it is not always immediately dramatic to the casual eye. Time has softened it, grass has covered it, weather has worked on its edges, but when first cut the ditch would have made the monument more clearly set apart. It was carved into the ground around the stones, forming a circular boundary. That work would have taken serious effort. The people who made it were not just placing stones in a field, they were cutting the earth itself to mark the circle. The ditch and the stones together made a place that was both raised and hollowed, both visible above ground and shaped below foot level. A ditch may sound practical at first, as if it were meant to keep animals out or people in, but at Brodgar it does not seem to fit that ordinary explanation very well. It was not a defensive ditch. It was not a farm boundary in the simple sense. It was part of the monument. It helped define the space. In some ways, It may have made the act of crossing into the circle more meaningful. To pass from outside to inside was to move across a boundary created by human labour. You did not just wander into an open field, you entered a marked place. That marked place must once have looked more complete than it does now. Many of the original stones are missing, and some that remain are broken or leaning. Archaeologists think the ring may originally have held around 60 stones. Today, fewer survive standing, and the gaps can make the monument feel like a sentence with some words lost. Yet even incomplete, the design is clear. The circle still holds. The missing stones almost become present through absence. You can see where the rhythm has been interrupted, and your mind quietly fills in what is gone. It is a little like hearing an old song with some notes worn away, but still recognising the tune. The stones themselves are local sandstone, tall slabs drawn from the geology of Orkney. They are not identical. Some are broad, some narrow, some more sharply shaped, others worn into softer outlines. Their surfaces carry the marks of weather and time. Rain darkens them. Sunlight warms them. Lichen and age give them texture. A standing stone is never just a stone once it has stood for thousands of years. It becomes a record of exposure. Every storm leaves nothing obvious at first, but together the storms write slowly. The stone becomes less like an object placed in the landscape and more like a participant in it. Imagine approaching the ring when all the stones stood upright. The circle would have been more continuous, more commanding, perhaps more formal. The standing slabs may have created a repeated visual rhythm, each stone separate but joined by the shape they shared. People walking around the outside would have seen the stones passing one by one, with the interior appearing and disappearing through the gaps. People inside would have been surrounded but not enclosed. There is a difference. Enclosure shuts a person in. A ring includes a person while still leaving the sky open. That open sky is important. At Brodgar you are always aware of it. The monument has no roof, no hidden chamber, no inner darkness like my show. It belongs to daylight, moonlight, weather, and horizon. The experience of being inside the circle depends on what the sky is doing. A low sun can make the stones cast long shadows. A grey day can flatten the colours and make the circle feel older, quieter. A clear evening can open the whole place toward distance. The same stones can feel different from 1 hour to the next, not because the stones change, but because the world around them does. For Neolithic people, that changing world was not a backdrop. It was information. Light, shadow, season, wind, bird movement, water level, the condition of crops and animals, all of these mattered. A place like the Ring of Brodgar may have helped people pay attention together. We sometimes think of observation as something done by one person alone, perhaps with a notebook or a telescope. But in ancient communities, watching could be shared. A community could notice when the sun rose or set in certain parts of the horizon. People could gather at repeated times of year and confirm that the cycle was turning. They could connect those observations to stories, ceremonies, and decisions about farming, animals, or social life. Entering the ring, then, may not have meant stepping into a place separate from the natural world. It may have meant stepping into a place where the natural world was made easier to read, remember, and experience. The stones stood in relation to one another, but also in relation to the surrounding hills and waters. The monument may have organised attention. It may have directed eyes. It may have created a setting in which people could feel that the sky, the land, and the community were connected. Still, we should resist making it too neat. The Ring of Brodgar was probably not simply an ancient calendar in the modern sense, as if each stone were a page and each gap were a date waiting to be checked off. That idea can be tempting because modern people like instruments. We like devices with clear functions. We like to say, this was used for measuring that. But Neolithic monuments often seem to work in broader ways. The ring could have had seasonal importance without being a precise calculator. It could have had astronomical meaning without being an observatory in the modern scientific sense. It could have helped people gather at important times while also carrying social ancestral and ceremonial meanings. As you stand inside the circle, the centre itself invites attention. Yet there is no large central structure now, no altar clearly waiting in the middle, no obvious stone table saying, yes, this was where the main event happened. This absence is interesting. It reminds us that the focus of the ring may not have been a single object. The focus may have been the space, the people assembled within it, the movement around it, or the relationship between the circle and everything beyond it. A centre can be powerful even when it is empty. In fact, sometimes emptiness makes a centre more flexible. It can hold many kinds of activity. Imagine a gathering there, not a fantasy scene full of impossible certainty, but a careful possibility. People arrive from nearby settlements, and perhaps from farther across Orkney. Some come on foot, some by boat. They bring food, animals, tools, pottery, stories and news. The day may be tied to a season, perhaps a time when work in the fields allows gathering, or when the movement of the sun or moon is important, or when social bonds need renewing. Smoke rises somewhere nearby. Voices carry in the wind. Children move between adults until someone tells them to stop climbing on things, because some parenting phrases are probably older than writing. The stones stand around all of it, not as decoration, but as the frame that makes the gathering different from ordinary life. The sound inside the ring would have mattered too, though we must be cautious. Open-air stone circles do not behave like enclosed chambers, but stones, bodies, wind, and space all affect how sound is experienced. Voices may have carried across the circle. Drumming, singing, chanting, or simple conversation could have taken on a special feeling in such a setting. The wide-open ring might have allowed a crowd to gather with a shared focus. People could see one another across the space. A person speaking or performing near the centre might be visible to many. A procession around the ring might make the stones feel like witnesses. The idea of stones as witnesses may sound modern, but it is not difficult to understand. Human beings often treat durable things as holders of memory. We visit grave markers, monuments, old houses, ancient trees, and historic places because they seem to connect us to events and people no longer present. A standing stone raised by ancestors could have carried that kind of weight. It might not have represented one named person. It might have stood for a group, a lineage, a myth, a direction, a season, or an act of building remembered by descendants. The Stones of Brodgar may have watched over gatherings in the sense that they gave those gatherings continuity. People changed. The ring remained. The relationship between the Ring of Brodgar and nearby monuments would also have shaped the experience of entering it. The Stones of Stenness stand not far away. Show lies within the wider landscape. The Ness of Brodgar sits between them. This was a monument-rich area, and movement from one place to another may have been important. The Ring of Brodgar may have been part of a route or sequence. Perhaps people gathered first elsewhere, then moved toward the ring. Perhaps the ring marked one stage of ceremonies connected with the living, the dead, the seasons, or alliances between groups. We do not know the exact order, but the closeness of these sites makes it unlikely that each was understood in complete isolation. To enter Brodgar, then, may have been to enter not only a circle, but a network of meaning. The landscape itself had memory built into it. A person approaching the ring may have passed places associated with ancestors, feasts, buildings, stories, or previous gatherings. The ring was one part of a larger experience. That is why its location between the lochs is so powerful. It was visible, accessible, and placed in a zone where movement naturally converged. It was not hidden away for a few people to discover by accident. It seems to have been meant to be seen, approached, and remembered. There is a practical side to all this as well. Building such a monument required coordination. People had to agree, or at least enough people had to agree, that the work was worth doing. Stones had to be selected, moved, raised, and stabilized. The ditch had to be cut. The circle had to be laid out. This required knowledge, leadership, labour, food supply, and time away from other tasks. In a farming community, labour is never free. If people are digging ditches and raising stones, they are not doing something else. They are not tending animals at that moment, repairing houses, processing crops, or making tools. So the monument tells us something important before we even know its purpose. It tells us that the purpose mattered. The size of the Ring of Brodgar may have helped express that importance. A small circle can hold a small group. A great circle can hold many people, and can be seen as a statement by the wider community. Scale changes meaning. When a monument is large enough to require collective labour, it becomes proof of cooperation. It says we can do this together. It may also say we belong together, or our ancestors belong here, or this place matters to all of us. The circle's size may have helped create the community that built it, because working together on a difficult project can bind people as strongly as the finished structure does. That is an easy point to miss if we focus only on the completed monument. The building process itself may have been meaningful. Quarrying the stones, moving them, preparing the ground, digging the ditch, raising each slab, these acts could have been ceremonial events in their own right. People may have gathered not just after the ring was finished, but during its making. Each stone raised could have been remembered. Each stage may have involved food, song, ritual, or social exchange. The Ring of Brodgar may not have suddenly become meaningful when the last stone was set. It may have gathered meaning through every hand that helped make it. When we imagine entering the finished circle, we should carry that labour with us. The stones are silent now, but they are not empty. They represent decisions and effort. They represent bodies pushing, pulling, lifting, balancing, and probably occasionally making the kind of frustrated noises people make when heavy things refuse to behave. Modern machinery can make us forget how intimate ancient construction was. To raise a stone without cranes is to know its weight in a very direct way. It is to work with rope, timber if available, earth ramps, levers, teamwork, and timing. It is to trust the people around you, because a falling stone is not a gentle disagreement. The completed ring may therefore have carried a memory of shared danger and success. A stone standing upright is not only a marker, it is a victory over difficulty. It says that many people acted together and the stone stayed. Multiply that by dozens, place them in a vast circle, and the result becomes more than architecture. It becomes a social achievement made visible. For a modern visitor, the experience is quieter. You might walk in alone or with a few others. You might hear traffic faintly in the distance, or the voices of people taking photographs. You might read an information sign, then look up and try to replace the modern world with the Neolithic one. That replacement is never complete. It should not be. The present is part of the site now too, but the stones still have a way of making modern time feel thin. 5,000 years is difficult to understand as a number. Standing among stones that have endured that long makes it easier to feel, though not exactly easier to explain. Inside the ring, the stones do not tell you what to think. That is part of their power. Some ancient monuments overwhelm the visitor with decoration or inscription. Brodgar does not. It leaves room. You can think about astronomy, ceremony, ancestors, community, landscape, or the simple fact that human beings once cared enough to make this place. The lack of a written explanation can be frustrating, but it also prevents the monument from becoming small. If we had a sign from the builders saying, "This circle was built for one festival only," we might understand more and wonder less. Instead, we stand in a wider field of possibility. That does not mean any explanation is as good as any other. Archaeology still matters. Evidence matters. The ring must be understood through dating, excavation, landscape study, comparison with other monuments, and careful attention to what is actually there. But imagination also has a role, as long as it stays honest. We can imagine people entering, gathering, watching, remembering, and moving through the circle because those possibilities are grounded in what we know of human life and Neolithic landscapes. We do not need to invent lost machines or secret messages to make Brodgar remarkable. Ordinary ancient human purpose is already more than enough. The more time you spend with the ring, the more the word ordinary begins to feel inadequate anyway. Farming communities building in stone, shaping ceremonial landscapes, aligning tombs with seasonal light, gathering across islands, and creating monuments that still hold attention after millennia. That is not ordinary in any dismissive sense. It is human ingenuity working within its own world, using available materials and shared beliefs to make places that carried meaning across generations. To enter the Ring of Brodgar is to step into that human achievement. Not as the builders did, because we cannot fully recover their thoughts, but with enough respect to understand that the circle was not random, not simple, and not silent by accident. It was made to matter. It changed a piece of land into a place. It turned local stone into a wide ring beneath the sky. It gathered water, horizon, season, and community into one carefully marked space. And as we stand there a little longer, the next question begins to form naturally. If entering the circle changes how the landscape feels, how exactly did the builders create that effect? What choices shaped the stones, the ditch, the size, and the unusual power of the monument? To look at Brodgar closely, we have to move from the feeling of arrival to the physical details of the ring itself, where the shape of the circle and the work cut into the ground begin to show how much intention was placed into this open space between the lochs. The closer we look at the Ring of Brodgar, the more it becomes clear that this was not simply a group of stones placed in a rough circle, because circles are pleasant and the builders had a spare field. There is intention everywhere, though it is an old intention, worn down by weather and partly hidden from us by time. The stones, the ditch, the size of the ring, the open centre, the space between each upright slab, and the way the whole monument sits between the lochs all seem to belong to a single act of shaping. Not just shaping stone, but shaping experience. The people who made Brodgar did not build a roofed temple or a fortress or a tomb. They made a circle large enough to hold people, sky, memory and uncertainty all at once. The stones are the most obvious part, of course. They are what catch the eye first. From a distance, they stand like dark marks against the grass and sky, irregular but ordered, separate but connected by the curve they share. Some are tall enough to feel almost like figures. Others are broken, lower, or missing entirely, leaving gaps that remind us the monument has had a long and difficult life after its first purpose faded. But even in its damaged state, the ring still has a rhythm. Your eye moves from stone to stone, and even where a stone is gone, the mind senses the missing beat. It is a little like seeing the remains of an old sentence carved into a wall. Some words are lost, but the shape of the message is still there. Originally, the Ring of Brodgar may have held around 60 standing stones. Today, far fewer remain upright, but the idea of the full circle is still powerful. Try to imagine it complete. Not as a ruin, not as a tourist site, not as a collection of lonely stones, but as a newly made place where each slab stood with fresh force in the landscape. The stones would not have looked ancient then. They would not have been softened by thousands of winters. Their edges may have been sharper. Their surfaces may have shown more clearly where they had been worked, split, moved and raised. The ring may have appeared not as a remnant of the past, but as something bold and immediate. A new mark placed on the land by a community that wanted the mark to last. Those stones were local sandstone, drawn from the same island world that held the monument. This matters. The builders did not bring alien material from far away to make a shocking contrast with the landscape. They used stone that belonged to Orkney, stone already part of the ground, already shaped by the geology beneath their feet. But once raised upright, the stone changed meaning. A slab lying in the earth is part of the land. A slab standing in a circle is part of human memory. It becomes visible from a distance. It creates shadow. It marks direction. It invites approach. It turns geology into architecture, and architecture into something closer to ritual. The act of raising each stone must have been demanding. We can say that calmly now, because the hard work is safely 5,000 years behind us, which is a convenient distance from which to admire heavy labour. But for the people involved, this was physical, organised, and probably risky work. Stones had to be chosen and extracted. They had to be moved across uneven ground, perhaps using ropes, wooden rollers, or sledges where timber was available, levers, earth ramps, and many hands. The builders had no modern cranes, no metal engines, no trucks humming politely nearby. Each upright stone represented coordination. Someone had to understand weight and balance, someone had to guide the effort. Many people had to pull together at the same time, which is hard enough when moving a sofa through a doorway, never mind raising a great slab of stone in Orkney weather. That labour is part of the monument's meaning. A stone circle is not just the finished result, it is also the memory of making it. Every stone would have had a story before it stood still. People may have remembered who helped move it, which group brought it, whether the weather was kind or miserable, whether someone made a mistake, whether a song was sung, whether a feast followed, whether a child watched from the edge and later told their own children, "I was there when that stone went up." We cannot recover those moments, but it would be strange to imagine that the process itself meant nothing. Large monuments often create community through their construction. People do not only build them because they already share a purpose. Sometimes the work itself strengthens the purpose. The spacing of the stones is also important. They are not packed tightly together. They allow movement and sight lines. The circle is open enough that the surrounding landscape remains visible through it. This openness gives Brodgar much of its character. It does not separate inside from outside in a harsh way. Instead, it creates a boundary that breathes. When you stand inside, you still see the lochs, the hills, the sky, the changing weather. The stones do not cut the world off. They frame it. They make you notice it differently. This is one of the great differences between a stone circle and a chambered tomb like Maeshowe. A tomb draws you inward, into stone, darkness, passage, and enclosure. The Ring of Brodgar does almost the opposite. It makes a sacred or special space without hiding it from the open world. The centre of the circle is exposed to daylight, moonlight, rain, and wind. Anyone standing there would feel the weather directly. There is no shelter, no roof, no inner room protected from the elements. If ceremonies took place there, they happened under the same sky that shaped daily life. That may have been part of the point. The circle did not remove people from nature. It placed them carefully within it. Around the stones lies the ditch, one of the most striking but sometimes less immediately appreciated parts of the monument. Today, the ditch is softened by grass and time, and a visitor might not grasp at first how much effort went into it. But when fresh, it would have been a major feature. It was cut into the bedrock around the circle, forming a broad ring in the ground. This was not a casual scratch in the soil. It was a serious act of excavation, and the fact that people carved it through stone tells us that the boundary mattered. A ditch around a monument can be puzzling, because modern minds often jump to practical explanations. Was it defensive? Was it for drainage? Was it to keep animals away? But at Brodgar, those answers do not feel sufficient. The ditch was part of a ceremonial earthwork. It marked the circle in the land itself. It made the monument more than an arrangement of uprights. It created a surrounding cut, a hollow ring that separated the interior from the ordinary ground beyond. Even if people could cross it at particular places, the ditch would have made crossing meaningful. It turned entry into an action. This idea of boundary is important. Sacred places often have boundaries, but they do not always need walls. Sometimes a boundary is a change in surface, a ditch, a bank, a row of stones, a threshold, a doorway, or even a line people know not to cross casually. The ditch at Brodgar may have helped define the ring as a place apart. It said, in the language of earth and labour, that this interior was not just another patch of grass. It was marked. It had been chosen. It had been cut out of the ordinary world and given a different kind of attention. The shape of the circle adds another layer. Circles are among the simplest shapes to draw and among the hardest to exhaust in meaning. A circle has no obvious beginning or end. It can suggest return, enclosure, unity, the horizon, the sun, the moon, the cycle of seasons, the gathering of people, or the boundary between one state and another. We should be careful not to assume that Neolithic people thought about circles exactly as we do, but it is difficult to believe the shape was accidental. To make a circle of this scale requires planning. The builders had to lay out the curve across the ground, place stones at intervals, and maintain the overall form. The result was not a line pointing somewhere simple, but a ring surrounding an open centre. A circle is also a social shape. People standing in a circle can see one another. They can gather without one side becoming more obviously important than the other, though special positions may still exist. A circle can hold a community physically and symbolically. It can make a group feel assembled as one body. Around a fire, around a table, around a grave, or around a speaker, circles still have this power. They create shared focus. At Brodgar, the circle was so large that it could have held a substantial gathering, with people standing inside around the edges, or moving through the spaces between stones. The shape may have helped organise people during ceremonies, meetings, or seasonal events. The open centre is especially intriguing. There is no surviving central stone or obvious permanent structure that explains everything. This emptiness can feel like a missing answer, but it may have been part of the design. An empty centre can be used in many ways. It can hold people, offerings, fires, movement, performance, silence, or simply attention. It can also remain empty as a powerful space in itself. In some places, the most important thing is not an object but the area everyone turns toward. At Brodgar, the centre may have been less a stage for a single monument, and more a space where different activities could happen at different times. The scale of the ring changes how that space feels. A small circle gathers people closely. A large circle creates distance, movement, and procession. At Brodgar, a person on one side can look across a wide interior to stones on the far side. The body becomes aware of size. The feet measure the circle slowly. Walking round it takes time, and that time matters. Ancient monuments often work through movement. They are not only seen from one perfect viewpoint. They unfold as people approach, circle, enter, turn, and leave. The Ring of Brodgar may have been experienced as much by walking as by standing still. Imagine people moving around the outside of the ring while others remain within it. Imagine a procession following the curve, the stones passing one by one. Imagine the ditch as a boundary that guides movement, perhaps allowing entry at certain points. Imagine voices across the open space, the sound carried or broken by wind. Imagine the low northern sun casting long shadows from the stones, so that the circle becomes not only stone but also moving darkness on grass. A standing stone is a solid thing, but its shadow changes constantly. Through the day, the shadows turn. Through the year, the angles shift. The monument is still, but its relationship with light is always moving. This brings us to the sky, though carefully. Many stone circles have been interpreted as astronomical monuments, and the Ring of Brodgar has often been discussed in relation to the sun, moon, and surrounding horizon. It is reasonable to think that the builders paid attention to celestial cycles. Their lives depended on seasonal rhythms, and nearby monuments such as Meishui show a clear interest in the relationship between architecture and midwinter light. But it is wise not to turn Brodgar into a modern observatory too quickly. The circle may have had sky-related meanings without functioning like a precise instrument. It may have framed certain views or supported seasonal gatherings. It may have helped people mark important times. It may have connected the community with the repeated movements of sun and moon in ways that were symbolic, practical, and ceremonial altogether. The stones themselves may have served as markers within that wider experience. Some may have lined up with features on the horizon. Some gaps may have directed attention. Some positions may have become important through repeated use. But we should remember that ancient skywatching did not require the same kind of separation between science and belief that we often make today. Observing the sun's return after winter could be practical because it related to the year, but it could also be emotional, communal, and sacred. Watching the moon may have helped track time, but it may also have connected people to stories and powers we no longer know. A stone circle could be both a place of observation and a place of meaning, with no contradiction at all. The ditch also might have changed how the stones were seen. A raised stone circle alone stands on the land. A stone circle with a surrounding ditch appears more deliberately set within the land. The cut earth may have created contrast, depth, and a sense of separation. If there was once an outer bank made from material removed from the ditch, the visual effect may have been even stronger, though the details are debated and altered by time. What matters is that the builders shaped both vertical and horizontal space. They raised stones upward and cut a ring downward. The monument was made by addition and removal, by standing and hollowing. That combination feels deeply human. We make meaningful places by putting things where they were not, and by taking things away where they once were. A grave is dug and marked, a house is built and enclosed, a path is worn by feet, a field is cleared, a circle is cut and raised. Brodgar belongs to that long human habit of turning land into memory through effort. The ground itself became part of the message. The stones vary in size and form, and this variation gives the ring a natural, almost conversational quality. A perfectly uniform circle might feel mechanical. Brodgar does not. Each stone has its own character. Some stand with a narrow blade-like presence. Some feel broad and heavy. Some lean slightly, as if listening to the wind. Their differences may be the result of available stone, weathering, damage, and restoration over time, but the effect is powerful. The circle is ordered without being rigid. It feels planned, yet alive with irregularity. This is often true of Neolithic architecture. It can be precise in purpose without being machine perfect. Modern people sometimes mistake irregularity for carelessness, but that is not fair. Working with natural stone, human labour and ancient tools produces a different kind of precision. The goal may not have been identical measurements. The goal may have been correct relationship. The stones had to stand in the right form, in the right place, within the right landscape. Their individuality did not weaken the circle. It helped create it. The surrounding landscape completes the design. If the same stones and ditch had been placed somewhere else, the monument would not be the same. Brodgar's position between the Loch of Harry and the Loch of Stenness gives it a sense of balance and threshold. Water lies nearby in more than one direction. The land narrows. The skies open. Other monuments are within reach. This circle's sacredness, if we use that word, did not come only from its shape. It came from the relationship between shape and place. Sacred is a difficult word because it can make us imagine fixed temples named gods and formal priesthoods, none of which we can confidently place at Brodgar in a detailed way. But sacred can also mean set apart, charged with significance, treated with care, approached through custom, and remembered across generations. In that broader sense, the Ring of Brodgar seems deeply sacred. Not because we know the prayers spoken there, if prayers were spoken, but because of the labour invested in it and the way it transformed the land. People do not cut a huge ditch through bedrock and raise dozens of stones in a wide circle for no reason. They do it because the place matters enough to change. There may have been rules about the circle. Who could enter, when they could enter? What could be brought inside, where people stood? What words were spoken, what gestures were made? Or perhaps it was more open, a place for broad gatherings where many parts of the community participated. We do not know, but monuments often shape behaviour even without written rules. A person entering a cathedral lowers their voice. A person stepping into a courtroom behaves differently from how they behave in a kitchen. A person standing at a grave may become quiet without anyone asking. Places teach behaviour through form. The Ring of Brodgar may have done the same. The ditch would have helped with that teaching. It made the difference between outside and inside visible. The stones made the difference memorable. The circle made the difference bodily, because a person could feel themselves crossing into a ring and standing within it. The experience was not abstract. It happened through the feet, the eyes, the skin, the breath, and the movement of other people around you. Think of the first time someone might have entered after the ring was complete. Perhaps they had seen the stones being raised over months or years. Perhaps they had helped with the work. Perhaps they had only heard about it. Then came a gathering, and the circle was used in a way that made its purpose real. The stones, once a construction project, became a place of ceremony. The ditch, once a labour scar in the earth, became a boundary. The centre, once open ground, became a focus. At that moment, the monument was not finished simply because the building stopped. It was finished because people began to use it. Use, however, may not be the right word if it sounds too practical. We use a hammer, we use a cup, we use a gate. A place like Brodgar may have been inhabited in moments rather than used. It may have been activated by gathering season, memory and ritual. On an ordinary day it stood waiting. On an important day, it became full of meaning. That pattern still exists in human life. A town square is just a paved space until a market, protest, festival or ceremony fills it. A church is a building, but during a wedding or funeral it becomes something more intense. A monument can sleep between events, then wake when people return. The Ring of Brodgar may have had that kind of rhythm. The stones and ditch were permanent, but the experiences they held may have been seasonal, occasional, or tied to particular moments in the life of the community. This could explain why the monument is so large and open. It was not made for one person alone. It was made for gatherings, for return, for repeated acts that needed a durable setting. The shape of the circle also has a way of resisting hierarchy, though not eliminating it. There may have been leaders, ritual specialists, elders, or groups with special roles. But a circle naturally places people in relation. It allows watching and being watched. It can create unity while still allowing difference. If stones represented groups, ancestors, directions, or stages of movement, then standing among them may have placed people inside a social and cosmological map at the same time. Again, we cannot prove such details, but the form allows for them. What we can say is that the Ring of Brodgar was made to be encountered. Its stones catch attention. Its ditch marks a boundary. Its circle shapes movement. Its setting gathers land, water and sky. Its scale implies community. Its survival implies importance. Even broken, it still performs part of its old work. It slows people down. It makes them look around. It turns a windy field into a question. And the question becomes deeper when we remember that Brodgar was not standing alone. The stones and ditch are impressive in themselves, but their full meaning belongs to the wider Neolithic world around them. Nearby were houses, tombs, other standing stones, and large buildings where people lived, gathered, worked, and perhaps prepared for ceremonies. To understand why this circle was sacred, or why it held such power, we have to look beyond the ring itself and into the society that built it, a society in which stone was not only material, but memory, and in which Orkney became one of the most remarkable centres of Neolithic life in all of northwestern Europe. The Ring of Brodgar becomes even more interesting when we stop treating it as a single monument and begin to see it as part of a larger world. A stone circle can seem lonely if we look at it in isolation, especially today, when time has stripped away so much of the life that once surrounded it. The missing voices, houses, fires, pathways, animals and gatherings are gone, and what remains is stone in a field beneath the weather. But in the Neolithic period, this part of Orkney was not empty. It was active, built, remembered, crossed and returned to. The Ring of Brodgar stood in the heart of a landscape where people had already invested enormous care in stone, ceremony, settlement and the dead. To understand it properly, we have to let the whole area fill in around it again. This is one of the reasons Orkney matters so much to archaeology. It gives us not only one famous monument, but a cluster of places that speak to one another across the land. The Ring of Brodgar, the Stones of Stenness, May Show, Barnhouse, the Ness of Brodgar, and the wider island landscape together suggest that this was one of the great centres of Neolithic life in northwestern Europe. The phrase Heart of Neolithic Orkney is modern, but it fits because this area does feel like a centre of gravity. Not in the sense of a capital city with walls, officials and paperwork, thank goodness, because nobody needs Neolithic paperwork in a sleepy documentary. It was a centre in a deeper sense, a place where people gathered meaning, memory, architecture and identity into the land itself. The Ring of Brodgar stands on the Ness of Brodgar, that narrow strip of land between the Loch of Harray and the Loch of Stenness. Nearby, the Stones of Stenness form an older stone circle, smaller than Brodgar but deeply impressive. Only a few great stones remain today, yet their presence is enough to make the place feel important. They rise from the ground with a kind of stark confidence, and they show that the tradition of raising stones in this area did not begin with Brodgar. The people who built the Ring of Brodgar were working in a landscape already marked by earlier monuments. They were adding to an existing pattern, not inventing meaning from nothing. That matters because ancient builders were often in conversation with older places. A monument could respond to another monument. A new circle could echo an older circle. A pathway might connect places of gathering, settlement and burial. A later generation might build near the work of their ancestors, not because land was scarce, but because memory was valuable. When we imagine the builders of Brodgar, we should not picture them standing on a blank piece of land, measuring a circle in a world without history. Their world already had depth. They may have known stories about the Stones of Stenness. They may have understood Meshau as an ancestral place. They may have moved through the Ness of Brodgar as a landscape thick with meaning long before the Great Ring was complete. Meshau is especially important in this wider setting. It is one of the most remarkable chambered tombs in Europe, built with careful stonework and placed in relation to the winter sun. Its passage leads into a central chamber, and around midwinter the low-setting sun can shine along that passage into the darkness inside. That relationship between architecture, light and season is not a small detail. It tells us that people in Neolithic Orkney were paying close attention to the movements of the sun and to the way built spaces could frame those movements. They were not simply piling stones together because stones were available. They were shaping experience with precision and care. My show also reminds us that the dead were part of this landscape. Chambered tombs were not just storage places for bones. They were places where ancestors, memory and community identity may have been gathered and revisited. The living and the dead were not necessarily separated in the way modern life often separates them. Ancestors could remain socially important. Their remains could be part of ceremonies. Their tombs could anchor rights to land, stories of origin, and connections between generations. If the Ring of Brodgar was used for gatherings, those gatherings may have taken place in a landscape where the presence of the dead was already powerful. Then there is Barnhouse, a Neolithic settlement near the Stones of Stenness. Its houses show that people lived close to these monuments, or at least that domestic and ceremonial spaces were not far apart. This is important because it prevents us from imagining a completely divided world, with ordinary life in one area and sacred life far away in another. In Neolithic Orkney, daily living and monumental building existed side by side. People may have moved from houses to stone circles, from hearths to ceremonies, from food preparation to gatherings, without feeling that they were entering entirely separate categories of life. The same people who built monuments also needed meals, warmth, sleep, tools, storage, and shelter from the wind. And if Orkney wind has not changed its personality too much in 5,000 years, shelter would have been appreciated with real enthusiasm. The houses at Barnhouse and other Neolithic sites in Orkney show a world that was organised, skilled, and deeply familiar with stone. Homes were built with care. Hearths sat at the centre of domestic spaces. Stone furniture and storage areas helped structure the rooms. These were not temporary shelters thrown together without thought. They were places of daily rhythm. Fires burned, food was prepared, tools were used and repaired. People slept, talked, planned, and carried out the countless small tasks that make life possible. A monumental landscape is always supported by ordinary labour. Someone has to grow the food that feeds the builders. Someone has to look after animals while others gather. Someone has to make and mend what the community needs. Behind every standing stone is a world of work that does not always get to look dramatic. The Ness of Brodgar itself has become one of the most extraordinary parts of the story. Excavations there have uncovered a complex of large stone buildings unlike ordinary houses in scale and character. These structures suggest repeated gathering, special activity, and an architectural ambition that changes the way we imagine this area. The Ness sits between the Stones of Stenness and the Ring of Brodgar, almost like a built zone connecting two great ceremonial places. Finds from the site include decorated stone, pottery, hearths, and evidence of feasting and repeated use. It gives the impression of a place where people came together for activities that were communal, meaningful, and perhaps ceremonial. The scale of the Ness of Brodgar is important because it suggests that the Ring of Brodgar did not stand beside a quiet footpath with nothing much happening nearby. It stood close to a busy, important complex where people may have gathered for generations. The monument was part of a landscape of movement and activity. People may have prepared for ceremonies at the Ness. They may have feasted there. They may have carried objects, food, or stories between the Ness, the Stones of Stenness, and the Ring of Brodgar. We cannot map the exact sequence of events, but the closeness of these sites makes it difficult to think of them as unrelated. They seem to form parts of a larger ceremonial geography. This kind of landscape would have required shared understanding. A visitor arriving from another part of Orkney, or perhaps from beyond Orkney, would need to know where to go, when to gather, what behaviour was expected, and what the places meant. That knowledge may have been passed through speech, memory, gesture, and repeated practice. No one needed a signpost saying "sacred landscape begins here." The land itself, shaped by monuments and custom, would have taught people how to move through it. Paths become meaningful when feet repeat them. Places become important when stories return to them. The Ring of Brodgar may have been one of the final or central points in a sequence that people understood through experience rather than written explanation. The monuments also tell us something about community scale. Building one large stone circle is demanding. Building a whole landscape of tombs, circles, settlements, and large structures over generations is something else. It suggests social cooperation across households, and perhaps across different groups. Neolithic Orkney was not a world of isolated families each doing everything alone. People must have worked together, shared labour, exchanged resources, and gathered for purposes that reach beyond daily survival. The monuments make cooperation visible. They show that people were capable of long-term projects, and that those projects mattered enough to continue. This does not mean Neolithic Orkney was a peaceful paradise where everyone agreed politely while moving stones and passing the barley. Human beings are rarely that simple. There may have been tensions, rivalries, negotiations, leadership struggles, and disagreements. Large communal projects can unite people, but they can also express power. Who decided where the stones went? Who organised the labour? Who had the authority to lead ceremonies or interpret the meaning of the monuments? Did different groups compete to contribute stones, animals, food, or labour? Did some people gain status through their role in building or ritual? We cannot answer these questions clearly, but we should remember that monuments are social as well as spiritual. They are made by people, and people bring complexity with them. even when dressed in very practical Neolithic clothing. The Ring of Brodgar may therefore have helped hold together a community that was larger than any single household. It could have served as a shared place for gatherings, where people who lived across the islands came to renew connections. In a world without written contracts, passports, or official borders, relationships had to be maintained through other means. Feasts, marriages, exchanges, ceremonies, and shared labour could all help bind communities together. A monument like Brodgar may have been a place where those bonds were performed in public. People came, stood among the stones, saw others gathered there, and recognised themselves as part of a wider social world. Feasting may have been especially important. Across many ancient societies, feasts were not simply large meals. They were social events where alliances were made, status was displayed, obligations were created, and memories were formed. To provide food for others was to show generosity and power. To eat together was to belong, at least for that moment. Evidence from Neolithic Orkney, especially around the Ness of Brodgar, suggests that large-scale consumption and gatherings may have played a role in the life of the monument complex. If people came together near Brodgar at certain times, food and ceremony may have been closely connected. A sacred gathering without food is possible, of course, but a sacred gathering with food is much easier to imagine and probably better attended. Cattle may have been central to this world. In Neolithic Britain, cattle were not only food sources, they represented wealth, labour, status, and social value. Bringing cattle to a gathering, slaughtering them, sharing meat, or displaying herds could have carried meanings beyond nutrition. Animals connected households to land and seasons. They required care throughout the year. They could be exchanged, gifted, or consumed in ways that shaped relationships. If the Ring of Brodgar was part of seasonal gatherings, animals may have been present in the wider landscape, adding sound, smell, and movement to what we now experience mostly as quiet ruins. Pottery too gives us clues about social life. Neolithic Orkney is known for grooved ware, a distinctive style of pottery with incised and applied decoration. This pottery appears at many ceremonial and settlement sites, and Orkney may have been an important centre in its development or spread. Pots are humble objects in one sense, but they carry enormous information. They hold food, drink, and stored materials. They are handled daily. They can be decorated in ways that express identity or tradition. When similar pottery styles appear across wide areas, they suggest networks of contact and shared ideas. The people of Orkney were not only moving stones, they were also shaping clay, style, and social connection. This wider network matters because the Ring of Brodgar was built during a period when ideas were moving across Britain and Ireland. Stone circles, passage tombs, henges, and other monument types appear in different regions, each with local character. Orkney was part of this broad Neolithic world, but it was not merely copying from elsewhere. In some ways, Orkney may have been leading or influencing traditions that spread beyond the islands. That possibility makes Brodgar even more fascinating. What looks remote on a modern map may have been central in the movement of ideas. The edge may have been a beginning. The heart of Neolithic Orkney also shows an unusual closeness between the domestic and the monumental. Skara Brae, though not right beside Brodgar, adds to this picture by preserving a village where stone-built houses reveal details of everyday life. Its survival is partly due to its burial under sand, which protected the remains until they were revealed again. The rooms, hearths, beds, and dressers give a strong sense of people living in well-made spaces. When we place Skara Brae in the broader Orkney story, the builders of monuments become less shadowy. We can imagine their homes, their tools, their furniture, their fires. The same culture that made domestic life out of stone also made ceremony out of stone. That continuity feels important. Stone in Orkney was not only monumental, it was practical, familiar, and everywhere. People used it because it was available and durable, but over time, practical familiarity may have deepened into symbolic power. A stone house protects a family. A stone tomb holds ancestors, A standing stone marks a place. A stone circle gathers a community. The same material moves through different levels of life, from the ordinary to the extraordinary. This may have made the Ring of Brodgar feel both grounded and powerful. It was made of the same earth people knew, but arranged in a way that transformed it. The placement of Brodgar among other sites may also reflect ideas about passage and transition. The nearby monuments include places associated with the living, the dead, gathering, and perhaps seasonal light. The land between the lochs could have acted as a kind of ceremonial corridor. Moving across it may have meant moving between different kinds of experience. Perhaps the Stones of Stenness had one role, the Ness of Brodgar another, and the Ring of Brodgar another. Perhaps certain ceremonies began in one place and ended in another. Perhaps some places were associated with origins, others with ancestors, others with wider community gatherings. These are possibilities rather than certainties, but the landscape almost invites such thinking because the monuments are so closely placed. We should also remember that the monuments were built and used over time, not all at once. The landscape changed across generations. A child might grow up seeing one monument already old, another being worked on, and another falling out of use. Their grandchildren might inherit a different arrangement of meaning. The Ring of Brodgar itself may have had a long life, with its purpose shifting over time. A place built for one kind of gathering may later take on another. A monument associated with a certain group may become important to a broader community. Meanings are not frozen at the moment of construction. They grow, fade, and change, just as people do. This changing life of monuments is something modern visitors can understand. Think of a building in a town that begins as a church, becomes a meeting hall, then a museum, then a landmark where people take wedding photos. The stones remain, but the meaning shifts. Ancient monuments may have lived through similar transformations, though in forms we cannot easily trace. The Ring of Brodgar may not have meant exactly the same thing to every generation that used it. Its great strength may have been its ability to hold many meanings without needing to explain itself in one fixed way. In the heart of Neolithic Orkney, then, Brodgar was not merely a stone circle. It was part of a living system of places. It stood near older stones, near settlements, near tombs, near large buildings, near water, and under a sky that marked the year. It belonged to a society capable of impressive building and subtle landscape planning. It belonged to people who were farmers, herders, builders, potters, navigators, mourners, storytellers, and organisers of communal life. They were not primitive figures standing at the edge of understanding. They were fully human people with skills, fears, hopes, obligations, and ideas about the world that were complex enough to leave us still wondering. The silence of the Ring of Brodgar can make it feel mysterious. But perhaps its setting makes one thing clear. This monument mattered because the whole landscape mattered. It was built in a place already thick with memory. It drew power from its neighbours, and it gave power back to them. The stones did not need to stand alone to be impressive. They were part of a network, and that network may have been the real achievement. Orkney's Neolithic people turned a stretch of land between two lochs into a ceremonial centre that could hold the living, the dead, the sky, the seasons, and the identity of a community across many generations. As we keep moving through this ancient landscape, the stones begin to feel less like objects and more like participants in gatherings we can almost hear if we listen carefully enough. The next step is to think about those gatherings themselves, not as vague rituals floating in the mist, but as human events made of bodies, voices, food, movement, memory, and the need to come together in a world where community may have been as important as stone. To imagine the Ring of Brodgar as it may have been, we have to put people back into the circle. The stones are powerful on their own, especially now, standing in the open with nothing but grass, water, weather, and visitors moving quietly around them. But they were not raised for emptiness. They were not lifted into place simply to look dramatic in the rain, though they have certainly become very good at that. They were built by people and for people, even if the exact purpose has slipped beyond reach. A monument of this size asks us to picture gatherings, footsteps, voices, waiting, movement, preparation, and moments when ordinary life became something more formal, more remembered, and perhaps more sacred. The people who came to the Ring of Brodgar were not strangers to the landscape. Many of them may have lived close by, in stone-built houses on Orkney's mainland, with hearths at the centre of their rooms and cattle in the fields beyond. Others may have travelled from different parts of the islands, crossing water or walking over low open ground. Some may have come from farther away, bringing goods, news, marriage ties, stories or obligations. Orkney was connected by sea, and in a world where boats made islands into stepping stones rather than dead ends, a major gathering place could draw people from across a surprisingly wide world. Try to picture them arriving, not as a silent line of mysterious figures, but as a living community. People come in groups, they carry things. Some bring food in pots or baskets, some lead animals, some hold tools, ornaments, or objects needed for whatever is about to happen. Children are there too, because children are rarely absent from real human life, even when modern reconstructions politely forget them. They may run ahead, ask questions, get told to stay close, and immediately fail to stay close. Older people walk more slowly, perhaps remembering earlier gatherings, earlier faces, earlier stones raised into place. Young adults watch one another. Relatives greet each other. Visitors measure the scene with careful eyes. Dogs may bark. Cattle may complain in the deep, patient way cattle do, as if every journey is an administrative mistake. The ring itself would have changed when filled with people. Today, we often experience it as quiet space, but in use it may have been full of sound. Voices crossing the open centre, footsteps in wet grass, the scrape of pottery, the lowing of animals, the crackle of fires nearby, the wind pressing words sideways so that people had to speak louder than they intended. Ceremony does not always mean silence. In many societies, the most meaningful events are noisy, social, crowded, and full of practical details. A wedding can be sacred and still involve someone looking for a missing shoe. A funeral can be solemn and still require food, fire, weather planning, and a place for everyone to stand. Ancient gatherings were likely no different. Meaning lived inside the ordinary details, not apart from them. This matters because we should not imagine the Ring of Brodgar as a cold, empty stage where rituals happened without human messiness. It was built by farming people whose lives were tied to animals, crops, kinship, weather, and seasonal work. If they came together at the ring, they brought all of that with them. Their ceremonies may have involved ancestors, the sky, the turning year, or the identity of the community, but they also involved hunger, fatigue, excitement, social tension, and the need to organise a large number of people in a windy place without anyone dropping something important into the ditch. Ceremonies at Brodgar may have taken many forms. Some could have been connected to the seasons. Others may have marked births, deaths, alliances, initiations, exchanges, or moments of decision. Some may have belonged to the whole community, while others may have involved only certain groups. We do not have written records to tell us who stood where, what was said, or what objects were used. But the monument's scale and setting suggest that gathering itself was central. The ring was large enough to hold many people, and its open centre allowed movement, display, speech, performance, or shared attention. It was not a small, hidden shrine for one person alone. It was a place made for collective experience. One of the strongest clues to the importance of gathering in Neolithic Orkney comes from the wider landscape, especially the Ness of Brodgar. Evidence there points to repeated communal activity, large buildings, decorated stone, hearths, pottery, and the remains of feasting. Feasting is easy to underestimate because eating feels ordinary to us. But in ancient societies, a feast could be one of the most powerful tools a community had. Food was never just food. It was labour made visible. It represented animals raised, crops grown, fuel gathered, pots made, and time invested. To feed many people was to make a statement. To share food was to create relationship. To accept food was to enter obligation, gratitude, alliance, or memory. If feasts took place near the Ring of Brodgar, they may have helped turn ceremonies into social events that people remembered for years. Imagine cattle slaughtered for a gathering, meat cooked and shared, pottery vessels passed between groups, fires burning in the evening, stories told as the sky darkened. The stones may not have been the place where all food was prepared, but they could have been the place where the gathering reached its most formal or symbolic moment. A feast nearby and a ceremony in the circle would not be separate in the way modern categories might suggest. Eating, remembering, negotiating, honouring the dead, watching the sky and renewing social bonds could all belong to one larger occasion. Cattle likely held particular importance. In Neolithic communities, cattle were wealth, food, labour and status all at once. They required care across seasons, and their movement shaped daily life. To bring cattle to a gathering, to exchange them, display them, sacrifice them, or share their meat could carry social weight. A large communal event involving cattle would not only fill stomachs, it could show which households were prosperous, which groups were generous, which relationships were being strengthened, and which obligations were being created. The Ring of Brodgar may have stood within a world where animals helped connect economy, ritual and identity. Pottery also would have been part of these gatherings. Grooved ware, the distinctive pottery associated with late Neolithic Britain and strongly represented in Orkney, was not merely a container style. Pots could carry food and drink, but they also carried decoration, tradition, and belonging. A pot brought to a gathering might show the skill of its maker or the identity of a household. It might be used in serving, storage, offering, or ritual action. Broken pottery found at ceremonial sites can suggest repeated use, deposition, and communal activity. Every fragment was once held in a hand. Every vessel once had a place in the rhythm of a meal, a rite, or an exchange. The people who came to the ring may have dressed in ways that marked identity or occasion. Clothing from this period rarely survives, especially in Orkney's conditions, but people likely used skins, woven plant fibres, wool or early textile materials, ornaments of bone, stone, shell, or other substances. Special gatherings often call for special appearance. Even without elaborate preserved garments, we can imagine people preparing themselves differently for a major event. A necklace, a polished stone object, a carefully made tool, a decorated pot, or a particular arrangement of hair and clothing could signal status, age, group identity, or ritual role. Human beings have always used appearance to say things that words do not need to repeat. There may have been specialists, though we should be cautious with modern labels. We do not know whether Neolithic Orkney had priests, chiefs, shamans, elders, ritual experts, or leaders in any formal sense. Those words come from other cultural contexts and can mislead if used too confidently. But large gatherings usually involve people who know what must be done. Someone remembers the sequence. Someone has authority to begin. Someone knows which object is placed where, which words are spoken, when to move, when to wait, when to enter the circle, when to leave. Whether that role belonged to elders, lineage heads, skilled ritual figures, or community leaders, the existence of the monument suggests organised behaviour. The circle itself could have helped structure that behaviour. Its shape allows many possibilities. People could stand around the inside edge, facing inward. They could gather outside the stones, watching selected people enter. They could move around the ditch in procession. They could pass through certain gaps between stones. They could use the centre for speech, offerings, dancing, singing, or display. The stones might have marked positions for groups, directions, ancestors, or faces of a ceremony. We cannot prove these details, but the architecture invites movement and arrangement. It is not a random open field. It is a designed space that encourages certain patterns of human action. Procession may have been especially important. Many ceremonial landscapes are experienced through movement from one place to another, not simply by standing still. In the heart of Neolithic Orkney, people may have moved between the Stones of Stenness, the Ness of Brodgar, and the Ring of Brodgar. Each place may have had its own meaning, and the route between them may have been part of the event. Walking together can be powerful. It creates rhythm, order, anticipation, and shared direction. A group moving toward the ring would become aware of the stone gradually. The circle would grow larger ahead. The lochs would frame the approach. The open sky would widen. By the time people arrived, the landscape itself would have prepared them. This may sound subtle, but ancient monuments often work through anticipation. A chambered tomb with a passage does not reveal its inner space immediately. A hilltop monument changes as you climb. A circle approached across open ground becomes more impressive with every step. The builders of Brodgar may have understood this through practice rather than theory. They knew how places felt because they lived in them. They knew how the body responds to distance, weather, slope, water, and stone. Their ceremonies may have used those responses carefully. Gatherings at the ring may also have helped maintain relationships between different communities. Orkney was made of islands and local groups, and people living in different places would need ways to connect. Marriage ties, exchange, shared ancestry, and seasonal gatherings could all help prevent communities from becoming too isolated. A major monument could serve as neutral or shared ground, a place belonging not just to one household but to many. Coming to Brodgar may have reminded people that they were part of a wider world. The circle may have made community visible by physically bringing people into one space. That visibility matters. You can know in theory that other groups exist, but seeing them gathered around you is different. You see their numbers, their animals, their ornaments, their children, their elders. You hear their speech and stories. You notice who has prospered, who has suffered, who has married whom, who has brought gifts, who stands close to whom. A large gathering is a social map made alive. The Ring of Brodgar may have been one of the places where Orkney's social world renewed itself, where alliances were confirmed, tensions managed, and shared identity performed under the watch of the stones. There may also have been ceremonies connected to death and ancestors. The wider landscape includes tombs, and Neolithic societies often maintained complex relationships with the dead. Ancestors could matter in claims to land, group identity, and spiritual life. The Ring of Brodgar itself was not a tomb in the way Machaut was, but it may have been used in ceremonies that referred to the dead. Perhaps bones, objects, or memories were brought into the circle. Perhaps gatherings honoured lineages or remembered founding figures. Perhaps the stones themselves came to represent ancestral presence in some form. This cannot be stated as fact, but it fits the broader importance of ancestry in Neolithic monument landscapes. The dead, for Neolithic people, may not have been gone in the simple modern sense. Their presence could remain active through tombs, stories, objects, and places. A monument like Brodgar may have allowed the living to gather in relation to those who came before. In a world without written genealogies, place could hold descent. Standing in the ring might have meant standing within the memory of the community, surrounded not only by living people, but by the work of earlier generations. The stones themselves, raised by ancestors, may have become ancestors of a sort, enduring bodies in the land. There could also have been rites of transition. Young people becoming adults, couples joining households, leaders taking roles, groups settling disputes, seasonal changes being marked. All of these might have required public recognition. A ring is a powerful setting for such moments because it places the individual within the community. Someone standing in the centre is seen by many. Someone moving through the circle is witnessed. The act becomes memorable because the place is memorable. The stones give weight to the event. They say, this happened here, where important things happen. Of course, not every gathering needed to be solemn. The ring may have hosted moments of celebration. Music, if present, would have been made with voices, drums, rattles, bone instruments, or other simple but effective means. People may have sung or chanted. They may have danced or moved in repeated patterns. They may have told stories connected to the landscape, the sky, animals, origins, or the building of the stones. A circle naturally lends itself to performance. It gives an audience a shape. It makes the centre available. It allows people to watch one another watching. That shared attention can make a story or song feel larger than itself. In the long evenings of northern summer, gatherings could have stretched through extended light. In winter, they may have taken place in deep darkness broken by fire, moon, and stars. The same circle would feel different in each season. Summer might bring movement, travel, and open visibility. Winter might bring darkness, closeness, and the emotional importance of the year's turning. The stones could hold both. Their permanence allowed them to receive different moods across the cycle of the year. The weather would have been part of every event, invited or not. Rain, wind, cold, and sudden light could change the atmosphere of a ceremony. Modern people often plan outdoor events with a nervous eye on the forecast, and Neolithic people would have known that feeling without the small comfort of weather apps pretending to be confident. A ceremony in strong wind might feel intense and difficult. A gathering under clear sky might feel blessed. Mist could make the stones appear and disappear. Low sunlight could turn the circle into a pattern of long shadows. Weather may have been interpreted, remembered, and woven into the meaning of particular occasions. What did people believe as they stood there? This is the hardest question. We can describe buildings, stones, pottery, bones, and landscape. Belief is more elusive. The people of Neolithic Orkney left no written theology. We do not know the names of their powers, if they named them. We do not know their stories of creation, death, sky, sea, or stone. We should not fill that silence with overconfident fantasy. But we can say that their monuments suggest a world in which place, season, ancestry, and community carried deep meaning. They built in ways that outlasted immediate need. They returned to certain locations across generations. They shaped architecture around light, movement, and gathering. These are not the actions of people indifferent to the unseen. Perhaps the Ring of Brodgar was a place where the community met the larger order of the world. That order may have included the cycles of sun and moon, the returning seasons, the presence of ancestors, the fertility of animals and fields, and the social bonds that kept people alive. Ceremony often works by bringing these layers together. A community gathers, performs repeated acts, shares food, remembers the dead, marks time, and leaves with the sense that the world has been renewed or made understandable for a while. The ring may have offered exactly that kind of renewal. It is also possible that different people understood the ring differently. A child may have experienced it as a place of excitement and strangeness. A young adult may have seen it as a stage for social recognition. An elder may have felt it as a place thick with memory. A ritual specialist, if such a person existed, may have understood alignments, stories, or rules that others knew only partly. A visitor from another island may have been impressed by its scale. A builder may have remembered the labour behind one particular stone more than any formal meaning. No monument has only one meaning to everyone who encounters it. Brodgar's power may have come from holding many experiences together. As generations passed, the gatherings themselves would become memories. People would say, perhaps not in these words, but in some human equivalent, "I remember the winter when the wind was so strong at the ring," or "I remember when that family brought 3 cattle," or "I remember when the old speaker stood by the tall stone," or "I remember when we walked from Stenness as the sun went down." These memories would attach to the place. The circle would become not only a setting for ceremony, but a container of stories. The more people returned, the more the ring gathered human time around itself. That may be one of the deepest purposes of monuments. They hold continuity. A person's life is short, a household changes, a generation passes, but a stone circle remains, and by returning to it, people can feel that they are part of something longer than themselves. The Ring of Brodgar made that longer life visible. It stood before children were born and remained after elders died. It gave the community a physical anchor in a world of change. Today, when we visit the ring, we arrive without the old ceremonies. We do not know the proper songs, gestures, roots or meanings. We come with cameras, guidebooks, muddy shoes and questions. Yet the monument still gathers people. Visitors still walk around it. They still stand quietly in the centre. They still look through the stones toward water and sky. They still feel, even if only faintly, that this is not an ordinary field. In that sense, Brodgar continues to do part of its ancient work. It brings people into a circle and makes them wonder together. The people who first came there are gone, but the need that brought them may not be so foreign. Humans still need places to gather. We still need shared moments that tell us who we are. We still mark seasons, mourn the dead, celebrate unions, make promises, share meals, and look for patterns in a world that often feels larger than our understanding. The Ring of Brodgar may have served a Neolithic version of those needs, shaped by a culture very different from ours, but rooted in the same human desire to belong to land, community, and time. As the gatherings fade back into silence, the stones remain in the open air, and the next part of the mystery rises naturally above them. Because if the people came together at certain moments, if ceremonies followed the year, if movement and memory were tied to the landscape, then we have to lift our eyes from the centre of the circle to the horizon beyond it. The Ring of Brodgar stands beneath one of the widest theatres humans have ever known, the sky, where the sun and moon moved in patterns that Neolithic people may have watched with patience, care, and a sense that the heavens were not distant at all, but part of the life of the stones themselves. When people stand inside the Ring of Brodgar today, it is almost impossible not to look up. The stones draw the eye at first because they're close, solid, and impressive in their weathered silence. But then the sky takes over. It is too large to ignore. In Orkney, the sky does not feel like a distant ceiling. It feels like part of the land itself, lowering, brightening, darkening, moving, pressing, opening. Clouds pass quickly. Light changes without asking permission. The horizon sits wide around the circle, and the stones seem to stand not only on the ground, but also within a great theatre of sun, moon, weather, and returning seasons. This is why the question of the sky matters so much at Brodgar. The people who built the circle lived in a world where the movements above them shaped the work below them. The sun did not simply make the day brighter, it marked warmth, growth, direction, labour, hunger, rest, and the turning of the year. The moon did not simply decorate the night. It changed shape, governed light after sunset, helped mark time, and moved through patterns that careful observers could come to know. The stars, too, were not remote points for casual admiration. They were part of night travel, seasonal awareness, and the deep human habit of finding order in darkness. For Neolithic people, the sky was practical, familiar, and possibly sacred all at once. It is easy for modern people to underestimate this because we are surrounded by artificial time. Our clocks tell us the hour. Our phones tell us the date. Our calendars remind us what we're supposed to do, sometimes with a little buzzing sound that manages to feel both helpful and mildly accusing. We can ignore sunrise and still know when to wake. We can stay up long after sunset under electric light. We can buy strawberries in winter and forget for a moment that the year once had much sharper edges. Neolithic communities did not live that way. They lived inside natural cycles more directly. When daylight shortened, life changed. When winter deepened, survival depended on stored food, healthy animals and cooperation. When the sun returned higher in the sky, the whole rhythm of work shifted again. So when we ask whether the Ring of Brodgar watched the sky, we are not asking a strange side question. We are asking how a farming and herding community understood time, season and order. The ring may not have been an observatory in the modern sense. There were no notebooks, telescopes, computer models, or someone standing in the corner saying, According to my calculations, please do not stand in front of stone number 27. But ancient people did not need modern instruments to observe patterns. They had patience, memory, repeated gatherings, and generations of experience. They could watch where the sun rose and set at different times of year. They could notice how the moon moved. They could connect these movements to ceremonies, stories, farming tasks, and social events. The Ring of Brodgar sits in a landscape where sky and stone clearly mattered. Nearby, Misto shows this with unusual force. Around midwinter, the low-setting sun can shine along the passage of that great chambered tomb and enter the darkness inside. That is not a small coincidence easily brushed aside. It shows that Neolithic builders in Orkney were capable of shaping architecture in relation to seasonal light. They understood how a particular moment in the sun's yearly path could be brought into a built space. They knew how stone could frame light, and how light could give meaning to stone. Brodgar is different from Misto. It is open, not enclosed. It has no passage leading into darkness. The sun does not enter it in one narrow beam. Instead, the whole circle is exposed to the sky. This makes its relationship with celestial movement broader and harder to pin down. A tomb with a passage gives us a more obvious alignment. A great open circle gives us possibilities spread across the horizon. The stones may have framed views. Certain gaps may have drawn attention to the rising or setting sun at important times. The surrounding hills may have served as markers. The moon may have been observed in relation to the ring. But because the monument is damaged, and because we do not have the builder's explanations, we have to move carefully. Careful does not mean dull. It simply means we do not force the ring to become something it may not have been. There has long been interest in the possible astronomical meaning of stone circles. Some people imagine them as ancient calendars, lunar observatories, or instruments for predicting eclipses. In some cases, monuments do show clear relationships with solstices, lunar standstills, or other sky events. In other cases, the evidence is less certain. With Brodgar, the most reasonable approach is to say that the sky likely mattered, perhaps very much, but the ring's purpose was probably not only astronomical. The movements of the sun and moon may have been woven into a larger ceremonial and social life. That distinction matters. A modern observatory is mostly designed to gather data. A ceremonial sky-watching monument may gather people, memory, belief, and seasonal order, as well as observation. The point may not have been to measure the sky with technical precision alone. It may have been to place the community within the sky's rhythm. When the sun reached a certain place on the horizon, people gathered. When the moon appeared in a certain way, stories were told. When winter turned, ancestors were remembered. When summer light lingered, bonds were renewed. The sky did not have to be studied as a separate subject. It could be lived as part of the community's relationship with the world. In Orkney, the sun behaves in ways that are especially noticeable because of the northern latitude. Summer brings long days and lingering light. Winter brings short days and long darkness. The difference is not subtle. It would have shaped daily life strongly. The return of longer daylight after midwinter may have carried emotional and practical importance. For farming people, the year was a matter of survival. The turning points of light were not abstract astronomical events. They were connected to food, animals, warmth, and hope. The low winter sun, the lengthening days, the first signs of seasonal change, all of these could become part of ritual attention. Standing in the Ring of Brodgar, one can imagine people watching the sun sink toward the horizon in winter, not casually, but with the seriousness of those who knew darkness intimately. The sun's path across the year is predictable if watched long enough. It rises and sets at different points along the horizon, reaching extremes at midsummer and midwinter before turning back. To notice this is to recognise a pattern that can reassure a community. Even when cold and darkness seem to dominate, the sun returns. The year has a shape. The world has not lost its order. The moon adds another layer of complexity. Unlike the sun's yearly path, the moon changes shape through its monthly cycle. and follows longer patterns across the years. Its rising and setting positions shift, sometimes reaching far northern or southern extremes over a cycle that takes many years. Some researchers have suggested that major stone circles may have been connected with lunar observations, including these long cycles. The Ring of Brodgar, with its large scale and open horizon, has often been considered in that discussion. It is possible that the moon's movements were important there, perhaps in ways linked to ceremony, timekeeping, or story. For people without written calendars, the moon is a natural marker of time. Its phases are visible, repeated, and memorable. A thin new crescent, a bright full moon, a dark moonless night, each changes the experience of the landscape. In a place like Orkney, where water reflects light and open land offers broad views, moonlight could transform the ring. The stones under a full moon would not look like the stones at noon. They would become silhouettes, pale-edged forms, figures in a quieter world. Shadows would fall differently. The lochs might hold broken reflections. People gathering at night would experience the circle through darkness, firelight, and moonlight. A very different setting from the daytime monument visited by tourists with waterproof jackets and sensible shoes. Night gatherings may have been powerful. We cannot prove when ceremonies took place, but many important human events happen after sunset because darkness changes attention. It narrows the world. It makes fire more important. It makes voices feel closer. It makes the sky more visible. In the Neolithic, without artificial light pollution, the night sky over Orkney would have been far richer than what many people see today. Stars, planets, and the Milky Way could have been part of the regular visual world. The circle would stand beneath that darkness, its stones marking the land while the sky marked something larger. The people who came to Brodgar may have known the sky through stories as much as through observation. Modern astronomy separates planets, stars, lunar cycles and solar motion into scientific categories. Ancient communities often connected these things through narrative. A bright star might be part of a seasonal sign. A constellation might be tied to animals, ancestors, or mythic beings. The moon's changing face might be connected to fertility, death, renewal, or timing. We do not know the stories of Neolithic Orkney, and it would be unfair to invent them too confidently. But we can say that sky patterns likely had meaning beyond simple measurement. Humans rarely watch the heavens for long without telling stories about them. This is especially true when the sky affects life so directly. If the appearance of certain stars or the height of the sun helped indicate the season, then sky knowledge became practical. But practical knowledge can also become sacred. Knowing when to plant, when to move animals, when to gather, when to expect seasonal change, this knowledge supports survival. A community may honour it through ritual because it is too important to leave as ordinary information. The Ring of Brodgar may have been one place where knowledge of the sky became public, shared, and memorable. A stone circle can make such knowledge easier to preserve. The stones provide fixed points against which changing sky events can be noticed. A person can stand in the same place year after year and watch where the sun or moon appears in relation to a stone, a gap, or a distant hill. Over generations, observations can become tradition. People may not explain this in mathematical terms, but they can say, when the sun reaches there, we gather. Or when the moon rises beyond that point, this time has come. The monument gives memory a physical structure. Of course, not every stone needs to be an astronomical marker. This is important. In a circle of many stones, some alignments will occur by chance, especially when the horizon has many features and the sky offers many possible events. We should not treat every gap as a secret code. That way lies the kind of enthusiasm that can turn almost any garden fence into a map of the universe if one stares long enough and has enough string. The better question is not whether every stone had a precise sky function, but whether the overall monument created a setting in which sky watching, seasonal gathering, and ceremonial memory could come together. That seems far more plausible and far more human. The surrounding horizon at Brodgar would have mattered. Horizon features can help mark celestial events. Hills, dips, ridges and distant landforms create a natural measuring edge. The sun and moon do not rise and set against an empty line. They appear in relation to the land. For people living in the same place for generations, those relationships become familiar. A particular hill may become associated with a particular season. A notch in the horizon may become a marker. The ring, placed within that horizon, could have helped turn the whole landscape into a calendar of attention. There is also the emotional effect of alignment. When sunlight, moonrise, stone and horizon coincide at a meaningful moment, the result can feel powerful even without technical explanation. Think of standing in a doorway as the setting sun suddenly fills the room, or watching the full moon rise exactly between two buildings, or seeing dawn break over a familiar hill on a day you'd been waiting for. These moments feel intentional, even when they are natural. If a community builds a monument so that such moments occur in a repeated and expected way, the emotional effect becomes part of the monument's purpose. Mayshow gives us a clear example of winter light entering darkness. Brodgar, being open, may have offered a different kind of experience. The community standing within a ring while the sun or moon appeared at a significant point on the horizon. Instead of light entering a chamber, people themselves stood inside the frame. The sky event did not happen hidden within stone. It happened across the entire landscape, witnessed by the gathered group. That would make the experience communal in a very direct way. The circle's broad size may have helped accommodate such shared viewing. Many people could stand within or around it and face a particular direction. A ceremony might involve turning toward a sunrise, sunset, moonrise or moonset. It might involve movement from one side of the ring to another. It might involve waiting, which is one of the oldest parts of watching the sky. Waiting for the sun to touch the horizon. Waiting for the moon to rise. Waiting for darkness to deepen. Waiting together can be meaningful because it synchronizes people. Everyone's attention rests on the same expectation. There is something deeply calming about that idea. A group of people gathered in the wind, standing among stones, watching the horizon for a known event. No one can hurry the sun. No one can negotiate with the moon. The sky arrives when it arrives. In a world where people had many uncertainties, this regularity may have offered reassurance. The cycles above did not remove hardship, but they gave it a pattern. Winter may be dark, but it turns. The moon may vanish, but it returns. The sun may sink, but it rises again. These are simple observations, but simple observations can become the foundations of belief. The Ring of Brodgar may also have connected sky cycles to social cycles. A season is not only a natural event, it is also a social organizer. Certain times of year are better for travel. Certain times require intense agricultural work. Certain times allow feasting. Certain times may be associated with slaughtering animals, storing food, exchanging goods, or gathering dispersed communities. If the ring helped mark these times, then its sky relationship was directly tied to human life. The sun and moon told people not only what was happening above, but what needed to happen among them. This helps explain why a monument could be both astronomical and ceremonial without contradiction. A gathering at a solstice, for example, is not just astronomy. It is social memory attached to astronomy. People do not come only to verify that the sun is behaving properly. The sun generally manages that without supervision. They come because the moment has meaning. They come because others come. They come because ancestors came. They come because the event connects the community to a cycle older than any one life. At Brodgar, the moon may have offered another kind of rhythm, less obvious day to day than sunrise and sunset, but perhaps deeply significant over longer observation. The full moon near winter can be especially striking in northern places, and long lunar cycles may have fascinated people who watched carefully over generations. Whether or not the ring was designed for a specific lunar event, the moon's presence would have shaped night ceremonies and seasonal perception. A monument open to the sky is open to all these changing lights. One can imagine certain stones becoming associated with particular appearances, not because each stone carried a written label, but because repeated experience attaches meaning. A child hears an elder say, "Watch there." The child watches. The event happens. Years later, the child becomes the elder and says the same thing. The stone becomes part of the memory of watching. This is how knowledge can survive without writing. It is not stored in books. It is stored in places, gestures, and repeated attention. The circle may have also helped people think about time itself. A ring has no beginning or end, and although we should not impose our symbolism too heavily, the form fits a world of cycles. Seasons return, the moon returns, the sun's path returns, generations return to the same places, ceremonies return at the proper times. The ring's shape may have echoed this sense of recurrence. Walking around it, people physically followed a path of return. Standing inside it, they were surrounded by a form that did not point forward like a road, but turned back into itself. This does not mean Neolithic people had a simple or purely circular view of time. Human life includes both cycles and irreversible change. People are born, age, and die. Stones are raised, broken, and remembered. A feast happens once, even if feasts return each year. The ring may have held both kinds of time, the recurring time of sun and moon, and the human time of memory and loss. That combination is one reason ancient monuments can feel so moving. They stand at the meeting point between what returns and what never comes back. The sky above Brodgar would have witnessed all of it. The first raising of stones, the first gatherings, the later ceremonies, the gradual changes in meaning, the falling of some stones, the arrival of people who no longer knew the original purpose. The modern visitors standing with cameras and questions. The sun and moon have continued their movements across the ring long after the old ceremonies ended. In that sense, the monument still watches the sky, though perhaps now we are the ones learning how to watch with it. And maybe that is the gentlest way to understand this part of Brodgar's mystery. The ring may not have been a machine for calculating the heavens. It may have been something more social and more meaningful, a place where the heavens became part of community life. The stones fixed a human circle within the wider circle of the year. The ditch marked a boundary on earth beneath the unbounded sky. People gathered between stone and horizon, between the needs of daily survival and the larger patterns above them. They watched light move, darkness return, the moon change, and the year turn. They turned those observations into ceremony, memory, and belonging. As the sun lowers in our imagined Orkney evening, the stones lengthen into shadow and the lochs take on the colour of the sky. The circle feels less like an answer and more like a way of paying attention. It taught people where to stand, where to look, when to gather, and perhaps how to feel that their lives were not drifting separately through time, but moving within a pattern shared by land, water, ancestors, and the lights above. From here, the old question waits for us again, larger than before. If Brodgar gathered people, marked a sacred space, and opened itself to the sky, then what was it really for, and why did this particular circle matter enough to be made at such scale in the heart of Neolithic Orkney? By now the question has become heavier than it first appeared. At the beginning it sounded simple enough. What was the Ring of Brodgar really for? A fair question, the kind any curious visitor might ask while standing in the wind, looking at the stones, and quietly wondering whether ancient people were being profound, practical, or just very committed to difficult outdoor projects. But after walking through the islands, entering the circle, looking at the ditch, imagining the gatherings and lifting our eyes to the sun and moon, the question has changed. It no longer asks for one neat label. It asks what kind of need could bring people together to build something so large, so lasting, and so carefully placed in the heart of Neolithic Orkney. The honest answer is that no one knows with complete certainty. That may sound unsatisfying, but it is also what makes Brodgar so compelling. The builders left no written explanation. No carved sign says, "This circle is for winter ceremonies," or "This stone marks a moonrise," or "Please gather here with cattle, pottery and a sensible cloak, because the wind will be rude." Archaeologists have evidence, patterns, comparisons, dates, nearby sites, material remains, and landscape relationships. These are powerful clues, but they do not form a single spoken confession from the past. So instead of pretending there is one final answer, it is better to treat the Ring of Brodgar as a place where several purposes may have overlapped. That is probably the first key. The ring may not have been built for one thing only. Modern people often like single-use explanations. A building is a school, a station is for trains, a clock tells time, a supermarket is where we go to buy food and mysteriously leave with things we did not plan to buy. But ancient monuments often resisted that kind of neatness. A place could be ceremonial, social, political, ancestral, seasonal and symbolic at the same time. The Ring of Brodgar may have been a gathering place, a sacred boundary, a seasonal marker, a connection to ancestors, a symbol of community identity, and a visible statement of cooperation all at once. None of these possibilities cancels out the others. In fact, they may depend on one another. Think first about community. The Ring of Brodgar was too large and too labour-intensive to be the private project of one household. Raising the stones and cutting the ditch required many people, planning, and repeated effort. That alone tells us something. The monument was built by a society capable of cooperation on a large scale. It may have been made because people needed a shared place that belonged to more than one family settlement or group. In an island world where communities were spread across land and water, a great central monument could help bring people together. It could be a place where relationships were renewed, disputes settled, marriages arranged, alliances confirmed, and news exchanged. The circle may have been a social machine, not in the cold modern sense of gears and engines, but in the human sense of a place that helped people become a community. If that sounds too ordinary, it should not. Holding a community together is one of the most important things human beings do. A person can survive for a while alone, perhaps, but farming, herding, building, raising children, caring for the old, surviving winter, moving animals, and facing uncertainty all work better when people are bound together by trust and obligation. A shared monument can help make those bonds visible. When people stand in the same circle, take part in the same ceremony, eat from the same feast, and remember the same stories, they are reminded that they belong to something larger than themselves. The Ring of Brodgar may have been built partly to make that belonging real. The monument's scale would have helped. A small shrine might serve a household. A great circle could serve many groups. The wide interior of Brodgar could hold a crowd. Its stones could be seen from across the landscape. Its ditch marked a large space as different from ordinary ground. This was not a hidden corner for private reflection alone. It was public, visible, and communal. Even if certain ceremonies were restricted to certain people, the monument itself made a broad statement. It announced that this place mattered to the wider world of Orkney. There may also have been an element of identity and display. Large monuments often say, "We are here, we are organised, we have ancestors, we have power, we can gather labour, we can transform land." That does not mean the Ring of Brodgar was built out of vanity. It means that monument building can express social strength. When a community raises stones that will outlast the builders, it makes a claim about continuity. It says that the people connected to this place are not temporary. They have roots, they have memory, they have the ability to shape the world around them. In a landscape already rich with older monuments, Brodgar may have been a grand addition to a long tradition, a way for one generation to speak to the past and future at the same time. The ancestral purpose may have been equally important. Nearby chambered tombs remind us that Neolithic Orkney had a deep relationship with the dead. Places like Mesha were not simply burial structures. They were carefully made spaces where the living could interact with ancestral remains, memory, and perhaps spiritual ideas about death and renewal. The Ring of Brodgar was not a tomb in the same way, but it may have belonged to the same world of ancestry. The stones themselves could have represented permanence, lineage, or the presence of those who came before. Gatherings in the circle may have honoured ancestors, remembered origins, or reaffirmed ties between living communities and the dead. In many societies, ancestors are not only remembered fondly, they can authorise the present, they can connect people to land, they can explain why a group belongs where it does, they can guide ritual action. A monument raised in a landscape of tombs and older stones might have helped make ancestry visible. The people who built Brodgar may have been saying, in stone and labour, that their community stood within a chain of generations. The circle surrounded the living, but it may also have surrounded memory. The choice of a circle could matter here. A circle can hold people together without pointing to a single endpoint. It can suggest return, continuity, and shared focus. Again, we should not assume the builders had the exact same symbolic vocabulary we do, but the form is still meaningful in practical terms. It gathers, it encloses without shutting away. It lets people face inward, outward, and across. If ceremonies involved ancestors, seasons, or community identity, the circle was a powerful shape for bringing those ideas into one space. Then there is the sky. Brodgar may have been built partly because the movements of the sun and moon mattered to the people of Orkney in ways both practical and sacred. Farming communities needed to understand seasons. They needed to know when winter was deepening, when light was returning, when certain tasks should be prepared. The sun's yearly cycle and the moon's changing phases gave visible order to time. A monument in an open horizon could help people mark, witness, and remember that order. Even if the ring was not a precise observatory, it may have supported seasonal ceremonies tied to celestial events. This may be one reason the ring setting feels so important. It sits between water, beneath open sky, within sight of other monuments. The landscape seems arranged for attention. The sun and moon rise and set against the horizon, not in isolation, but in relation to hills, water, stones, and human gathering. A community standing within the circle at a meaningful time of year could experience the sky not as distant, but as part of the ceremony. The ring may have been a place where time became visible, not time as numbers on a clock, but time as light, darkness, return, and waiting. The winter season may have held special importance. In northern places, midwinter is not a small moment. It is a real turning point when darkness reaches its greatest strength, and the promise of returning light begins. Nearby, Mayshow's relationship with midwinter sunset shows that Neolithic builders in Orkney cared about this kind of seasonal light. Brodgar, open and wide, may have served a different but related purpose. It could have been a place where people gathered to witness the year's turning, to affirm that the sun would return, and to connect the cycle of light with ceremonies of renewal, ancestry, feasting, or social order. The moon may have added another layer. Its phases are easier to track than long solar shifts, and its light transforms the night landscape. Longer lunar cycles may also have been known to careful observers over generations. Some have suggested that Brodgar and other stone circles were connected to lunar standstills or moonrise and moonset points. The evidence is complex and debated, but the possibility reminds us that Neolithic sky knowledge may have been patient and cumulative. People who live in the same place for generations can know the horizon with great care. They can notice patterns that a passing visitor would miss completely, but sky watching alone probably does not explain the full monument. If the builders only wanted a marker for sunrise or moonrise, they might not have needed such a large circle and ditch. The scale suggests that observation was woven into gathering. The ring may have made celestial events communal. The point was not just to know where the sun would set, but to come together when it did. Not just to watch the moon, but to watch it with others, in a place shaped by ancestors and labour. The sky gave timing, the ring gave setting, the people gave meaning, Another possible purpose is ceremonial transformation. Many monuments create a sense of moving from ordinary space into special space. The ditch around Brodgar helped do this. It marked the interior as different. Crossing that boundary may have changed a person's role or behaviour. A ceremony might begin outside and continue inside. People might move around the ring before entering. Certain individuals might pass through specific gaps. Objects might be carried into the centre. Food, pottery, animal remains, or other offerings might be placed or removed. These actions would not leave all their meanings in the archaeological record, but the shape of the monument suggests that controlled movement and boundary crossing could have mattered. Why build a boundary that is not defensive? Because not all boundaries are meant to keep enemies out. Some boundaries tell people when they're entering a different kind of place. A church doorway does this, a cemetery gate does this, a courtroom threshold does this, even a stage edge does this. You step across, and the behaviour changes. The ditch and stones of Brodgar may have worked in a similar way. They made the circle into a special interior, a place where certain actions had more weight because they happened there. The Ring of Brodgar may also have been built as part of a route through the wider ceremonial landscape. The nearby Stones of Stenness, Ness of Brodgar and Maeshur suggest that people may have moved between important places in sequence. If so, Brodgar's purpose cannot be understood only by standing in its centre. It may have been one stop in a larger journey, perhaps the place where a procession ended, or where a ceremony opened out into a wider gathering. The landscape between the lochs could have functioned like a sacred corridor, with each monument contributing a different atmosphere and role. The Stones of Stenness are older and more intimate. Maeshur is enclosed, dark and connected to the dead and the winter sun. The Ness of Brodgar appears to have been a major complex of buildings and activity. The Ring of Brodgar is vast, open and circular. Perhaps each place offered a different experience: enclosure and openness, ancestors and community, darkness and sky, preparation and gathering. We cannot reconstruct the exact order, but the contrast between these sites feels meaningful. Brodgar may have been built to complete or expand this ceremonial landscape, giving it a great open ring where many people could gather in relation to the other sacred places nearby. There is also the possibility of political purpose, though we should use the word gently. Politics in Neolithic Orkney would not have looked like modern government, with offices, elections, and someone losing an important document right before a meeting. But communities still had power relationships. Decisions had to be made. Labour had to be organised. Land and animals had to be managed. Marriages, exchanges, disputes, and obligations all shaped social life. A large central monument could provide a setting where authority was displayed and negotiated. Those who organised ceremonies or feasts may have gained influence. Those who contributed labour or animals may have shown status. The ring could have been a place where social order was performed. In this sense, sacred and political purposes may not have been separate. A ceremony can legitimise leadership. A feast can create obligation. A monument can embody shared values while also expressing the power of those who control access or meaning. The Ring of Brodgar may have helped bind people together, but it may also have helped certain groups shape the terms of that togetherness. Ancient monuments are rarely innocent of power. They are beautiful, mysterious, and meaningful, but they also require organisation. Someone persuaded others to work. Someone had a vision of where the stone should stand. Someone decided that this effort mattered. The building process itself may have been one of the main reasons for the monument. This is easy to overlook because we usually focus on what a place was used for after completion, but raising the stones and cutting the ditch may have been as socially important as the finished ring. The work brought people together. It required cooperation across time. It created shared stories. It gave people a common achievement. Each stone raised could have marked a moment of collective success. The monument may have been built not only to host future gatherings, but to create community through the act of building. Imagine the process unfolding over seasons, perhaps years. People quarry stone. They prepare the ground. They cut the ditch with stone tools. antler picks or other implements, working through hard material slowly. They transport slabs, coordinate teams and raise uprights. Food must be provided. Work must be timed around farming duties. People must return again and again. Children watch the circle grow. Elders compare it to older places. By the time the ring is complete, it already contains memory. It is not a blank new monument waiting to become meaningful. It is meaningful because of everything it took to make it. This may help explain why Brodgar's purpose feels layered. A monument built by many hands over time gathers many meanings before its first formal ceremony even begins. A person who helped dig the ditch may see it differently from someone who only attends later gatherings. A family that contributed labour may feel connected to a particular part of the ring. A group that brought a stone may remember it as theirs, even if the circle belongs to all. The finished monument becomes a shared place made from many personal and group histories. What about trade and exchange? The ring may have been connected to gatherings where goods moved between communities. Orkney was part of wide networks, and major ceremonial events often provide opportunities for exchange. People travelling to Brodgar could bring pottery, stone tools, animal products, ornaments, food, or stories. Exchanges at such gatherings would not be purely economic. They would be social acts, tied to trust, alliance, obligation, and status. A monument can make exchange more formal and memorable. A gift given in an ordinary field is one thing. A gift given among ancestral stones during a seasonal gathering is something else. The Ring of Brodgar may also have helped structure memory of the landscape itself. By placing a giant circle between the lochs, the builders created a point around which stories could gather. The surrounding water, hills, other monuments, and paths all became related to the ring. It gave the landscape a centre, or at least one powerful centre among several. People could tell stories by reference to it. They could mark journeys by it. They could orient themselves socially and spiritually around it. A monument of this scale changes how a place is remembered. Perhaps it was built because the people of Neolithic Orkney were living through change. Monument building often occurs in times when communities need to reinforce identity, manage growing social complexity, or respond to shifting conditions. The late Neolithic world was not static. Populations, farming practices, exchange networks, ritual traditions, and relationships between groups could all change. A great monument may help create continuity during change. It gives people something durable to return to when life around them is uncertain. The Ring of Brodgar may have been a response to the need for stability, a circle of stone in a world where everything else moved. This does not mean the builders were afraid or desperate. They may have been confident, ambitious, and creative. The ring could have been an expression of flourishing, not crisis. A community with enough resources and shared purpose to build Brodgar may have felt powerful in its own world. The monument may have celebrated that strength. It may have shown that Orkney was not a margin, but a centre. It may have drawn people in because it was already famous in its own time, a place worth travelling to, a place where important things happened. There is a quiet danger in trying to choose just one explanation. If we say it was a calendar, we lose the people. If we say it was a temple, we may impose later ideas of religion. If we say it was a meeting place, we risk making it too ordinary. If we say it was a symbol of power, we may miss its emotional or ancestral depth. The Ring of Brodgar was likely important because it could hold all these functions together. It was a place where time, community, memory, ceremony, landscape, and authority met in stone. That may be why it still resists us. A single-purpose object can be explained and put away. A multi-layered place keeps opening. Each clue leads to another. The ditch points to boundary. The stones point to gathering. The scale points to cooperation. The setting points to landscape and sky. The nearby monuments point to ancestry and ceremony. The evidence of feasting points to social life. The absence of writing leaves room for humility. Together, these clues do not give us a simple answer, but they do give us a rich one. So why was the Ring of Brodgar built? It may have been built so people could gather in a place larger than any one household. It may have been built to mark and experience the turning of the year. It may have been built to honour ancestors and connect the living to the dead. It may have been built to display the strength and identity of Orkney's communities. It may have been built to create a sacred boundary where ceremonies could unfold under the open sky. It may have been built because the act of building itself brought people together. It may have been built because the land between the lochs already mattered, and the ring made that meaning visible. And perhaps, after all this careful thinking, the best answer is not one word, but one image. People standing in a wide circle of stone, with water on both sides, wind moving over the grass, the sky changing above them, and the memory of generations held in the ground beneath their feet. Some have come from nearby houses, others have travelled, food has been shared, the old stories have been spoken, the sun or moon has reached the place on the horizon that everyone was waiting for. The stones do not explain themselves because they do not need to. Their purpose is happening in the gathering itself. That is the part modern visitors can still almost feel. We arrive too late for the original ceremonies, but not too late to sense that the monument was made for presence. It was made for people to be there, together, attentive to land, sky, and one another. Its meaning was not locked inside the stones like a secret mechanism. It was created again and again whenever people returned to the ring and did what their community understood should be done there. The tragedy and the beauty is that the actions have vanished while the place remains. We have the frame, but not the full picture. We have the circle, but not the voices. We have the stones, but not the old reasons spoken in the builder's own language. Yet the absence does not make the ring empty. It makes it spacious. It allows us to approach with care, to admit what we do not know, and to recognise that ancient human lives were rich enough to leave questions that cannot be flattened into a single answer. As the light changes over Brodgar and the stones settle into evening, the question begins to soften. Maybe the Ring of Brodgar was not built to give future people a puzzle to solve. It was built to serve a living world, one of farmers, herders, builders, ancestors, ceremonies, seasons and gatherings between water and sky. Its purpose was not hidden from those who made it. It was known in movement, memory, and return. And even though that knowledge has faded, something remains in the shape of the circle. Something strong enough that people still come to stand there, look around, and feel that the old stones are not finished speaking. The Ring of Brodgar still stands today in a world that would be almost impossible for its builders to recognise. The people who raised those stones knew nothing of satellites, electric lights, ferries with engines, archaeology departments, online maps, or visitors arriving with small glowing rectangles held up to photograph the ancient quiet. They did not know their circle would one day be protected, studied, measured, argued over, admired, and gently walked around by people from countries they could never have imagined. They built it for their own world, not ours, and yet somehow, after 5,000 years of wind, rain, loss, and forgetting, the circle still speaks to us. It does not speak loudly. That is important. Some monuments announce themselves with carvings, inscriptions, walls, towers, and carefully preserved names. Brodgar offers something quieter. It gives us stones, space, weather, and a question. It does not tell us exactly what happened there. It does not explain which ceremonies were performed, who led them, what songs were sung, what offerings were made, or why the ring was finally abandoned. Its old language has gone. The people who understood its full meaning have returned to the earth, and even the stories told about them by later generations have faded. What remains is not a complete message, but a trace strong enough to keep drawing attention. That may be why the Ring of Brodgar feels less like an answer and more like a presence. You can walk into it and understand very little in a factual sense, yet still feel that something important happened there. The stones create a kind of pause. The ordinary speed of thought changes. The modern habit of needing everything labelled and explained begins to loosen. You look at the circle, then at the lochs, then at the sky, then back at the stones. and there is a strange sense that the place is not empty, even though the original ceremonies are gone. It is full of absence, which sounds like a contradiction until you stand in an ancient place and feel how powerful absence can be. The missing stones are part of that feeling. A perfect monument might impress us, but a damaged one invites us to imagine. At Brodgar, some stones still stand tall, others are broken, and many are gone. The circle is incomplete but not destroyed. It still holds its shape in the mind. The gaps do not erase it. They make us aware of time. They remind us that even stone has a life, and that endurance is not the same as untouched survival. The ring has changed, but it has not disappeared. It carries its injuries in the open, which may be one reason it feels so honest. The ditch too has softened. What was once cut sharply into the ground has been rounded by centuries. Grass has covered it. Weather has worn it down. The dramatic boundary made by Neolithic hands is now quieter, easier to overlook if you arrive without knowing what to notice. But the ditch is still there, and so is the idea behind it. A circle was marked into the land. A space was separated from the everyday world. People once recognised that crossing into this place mattered. Today, even if we cross more casually, something of that old threshold remains. The body may not know the ancient rules, but it still senses the change. Modern visitors come for many reasons. Some come because they love archaeology. Some come because Orkney is beautiful. Some come because the Ring of Brodgar is famous. Some come because standing stones have a deep pull on the imagination, especially when the weather is dramatic enough to make everyone feel as if they have wandered into a very serious historical documentary. Some come with careful questions about Neolithic society, and others come simply to look. All of these approaches are valid in their own way. The monument can hold experts and dreamers, tired travellers and local walkers, photographers, historians, and people who only meant to stop for a few minutes but find themselves staying longer. That is one of the quiet powers of Brodgar. It makes people stay longer, not always physically, though many do, but mentally. The circle follows you after you leave. It becomes one of those places that does not fully end when you walk away from it. Later, perhaps in a hotel room, on a ferry, or at home far from Orkney, you may think again of the stone standing between the lochs. You may wonder what it felt like when the circle was new. You may imagine the people who came there in winter or summer, in daylight or moonlight, with cattle, pottery, food, stories and memories. The stones begin as a view and become a question that travels with you. For archaeologists, the Ring of Brodgar still whispers through evidence. Every measurement, excavation, survey and comparison adds another small piece to the story. The monument is no longer treated as an isolated curiosity. It is studied as part of the wider heart of Neolithic Orkney, alongside Meshoa, the Stones of Stenness, Scarabray, Barnhouse, the Ness of Brodgar, and the surrounding landscape. This wider understanding has changed everything. Brodgar is not a lonely stone circle at the edge of the world. It is part of a remarkable ceremonial and social landscape, one that shows how skilled, organised, and ambitious the people of Neolithic Orkney really were. That is one of the most important whispers the ring still carries. It tells us not to underestimate the ancient past. The builders of Brodgar did not have metal tools in the way later societies did. They did not have writing, wheels for heavy transport in the modern sense, or mechanical cranes. But they had knowledge, patience, cooperation, and a deep understanding of their materials and landscape. They knew how to quarry stone, move it, raise it, and arrange it. They knew how to build houses, tombs, and ceremonial spaces. They knew their seasons and horizons. They knew how to bring people together for projects that outlasted individual lives. If we call them simple, we are not describing them. We are only revealing the limits of our own imagination. The Ring of Brodgar asks us to expand that imagination, but not in a wild or careless way. It does not need impossible machines, lost super civilizations, or visitors from the stars to be extraordinary. The truth is already extraordinary enough. Farming communities in Northern Islands created a sacred landscape of stone that still challenges us after thousands of years. They built with local materials, human labour, and shared purpose. They made places that could hold ceremony, memory, social life, and skywatching without leaving written instructions. That is not a lesser mystery. It is a deeper one, because it belongs fully to human beings. There is a kind of respect in allowing ancient people to be both familiar and different. They were like us in many basic ways. They needed food, shelter, warmth, belonging, and meaning. They cared for children, mourned the dead, watched the seasons, and gathered with others. They must have laughed, worried, argued, taught, remembered, and hoped. But they were also not us. Their beliefs, stories, and categories of thought were shaped by a world very different from ours. We should not make them into modern people wearing older clothes, nor should we make them into unknowable shadows. The Ring of Brodgar sits between those mistakes. It invites empathy, but also humility. Humility may be one of the strongest lessons the Ring still offers. There are things we may never know. We may never know the original name of the place, if it had one. We may never know what words were spoken during ceremonies. We may never know whether one stone mattered more than another, or whether certain families stood in certain positions, or whether children were allowed inside at particular moments, or whether a winter moonrise made people fall silent. Archaeology can narrow possibilities and reveal patterns, but it cannot return every lost voice. The past is not a cupboard we can simply open when we become curious. It is more like a landscape seen through mist. Some shapes are clear, others remain hidden, and yet the hidden parts do not make the known parts meaningless. We know enough to recognise importance. We know this was a major monument. We know it was built with effort. We know it stood in a landscape dense with other Neolithic sites. We know the people of Orkney were skilled builders and organised communities. We know stone, water, sky, ceremony, and gathering were likely woven together in ways that mattered deeply. We know the ring remained important enough to endure in the land and in human attention. That is not everything, but it is not nothing. It is a strong outline, and sometimes an outline is enough for wonder to enter. Today, the Ring of Brodgar also whispers about the relationship between people and place. Modern life can make places feel interchangeable. Airports, shopping centres, roads, hotel rooms and screens can blur the world into repeating patterns. But ancient monuments remind us that some places become meaningful because people return to them, work on them, tell stories about them, and connect them to the rhythms of life. Brodgar was not just a convenient location. It was a chosen place, a place made meaningful by generations. Its power came from the land between the lochs, the stones raised there, and the human acts repeated around them. That idea still matters. We all have places that hold memory, a childhood street, a kitchen table, a grave, a beach, a church, a path walked with someone we loved, a hill where the view made life feel briefly understandable. These places may not have standing stones, but they do something similar on a personal scale. They gather time. They help us remember who we were, who we lost, what changed, and what endured. The Ring of Brodgar is a communal version of that human impulse, expanded into stone and landscape. It is memory made large. It also whispers about time. Not clock time, not calendar time, but deep time. The kind that makes ordinary worries feel smaller for a while. 5,000 years is a difficult span to hold in the mind. It reaches back before the pyramids of Egypt were built, before Stonehenge reached its final great form, before written history in many parts of the world. And yet, Brodgar is still present. You can stand beside stones that were raised by hands from a world almost unimaginably distant from ours. The gap between us and them is enormous, but the stones make it feel crossable for a moment. That is one of the strange gifts of ancient places. They turn time from an abstraction into something you can almost touch. But Brodgar does not only point backward, it also points forward, because its survival depends on what people do now. Ancient monuments are not indestructible. They can be damaged by weather, erosion, neglect, careless tourism, climate change, and even too much admiration from too many feet. Preserving them requires attention and restraint. It requires us to understand that wonder is not ownership. We are visitors to these places, not their masters. The stones have lasted thousands of years, but that does not mean they can endure anything we do to them. If we want future generations to stand in the circle and wonder as we do, we have to treat the silence carefully. This care is especially important in Orkney, where the changing climate threatens coastal archaeology and fragile landscapes. Rising seas, stronger storms, and erosion are not distant concerns for island heritage. They are already part of the story. Many ancient sites around Orkney and beyond are vulnerable because they were built close to coasts, lochs, and low-lying land. This same sea that once connected Neolithic communities can also take away the traces they left behind. The Ring of Brodgar itself stands inland between lochs, but the wider archaeological world of Orkney reminds us that preservation is not guaranteed. The past can be lost twice, first when its people vanish, and again when its remains disappear. There is something sobering about that. We often think of ancient sites as fixed, as if they belong to a permanent category called history. But history is physically fragile. A wall collapses, a coastline erodes, a stone falls, a record is lost. A careless hand damages what weather spared. The Ring of Brodgar's endurance should not make us complacent, it should make us grateful. The circle survived long enough to reach us, and now we are part of its story, whether we plan to be or not. For the people of Orkney today, Brodgar is not only an archaeological site, it is part of a living landscape. Local communities live near these monuments, work near them, guide visitors through them, protect them, and carry the responsibility of sharing them with the world. That can be a complicated gift. A place of global importance is also someone's local ground, someone's view, someone's weather, someone's road home. It is worth remembering that ancient heritage does not float above modern life. It exists within it. The stones stand among farms, roads, visitors, conservation rules, local stories, and everyday island experience. The past and present meet there constantly, and perhaps that is fitting. The Ring of Brodgar was always a place where things met. Land and water, stone and sky, the living and the dead, seasonal time and human memory, local communities and wider connections. Today it also holds archaeology and imagination, tourism and preservation, scientific study and personal awe. The circle continues to gather different worlds into one space. Its original ceremonies may be gone, but its ability to draw people together has not ended. What does it whisper then, if we listen gently? It whispers that ancient people were patient. It whispers that community can be built in stone, but only if it first exists in shared purpose. It whispers that the sky once mattered in ways many of us have forgotten. It whispers that landscapes can be read, honoured and transformed. It whispers that not every mystery needs to be solved flat to be understood deeply. It whispers that human beings have always wanted to stand somewhere meaningful and feel themselves part of something larger than one life. It also whispers that silence is not emptiness. This may be its quietest lesson. The Ring of Brodgar does not give us the comfort of complete knowledge. It leaves room for uncertainty, and in that uncertainty there is a kind of peace. We do not have to conquer every mystery. We can study carefully, think clearly, respect evidence, and still allow some parts of the past to remain beyond us. The stones do not become less powerful because they keep some secrets. They become more human because every life, every community, and every place keeps some secrets in the end. As evening settles over the imagined circle, the stones grow darker against the open sky. The lochs hold the last light. The wind moves through the grass as it has done for longer than any story can follow. Somewhere beyond the ring are the traces of houses, tombs, and other stones, the remains of a world that once knew exactly why this place mattered. We arrive after the voices have faded, but not after all meaning has gone. Meaning still lingers in the shape, in the effort, in the setting, and in the way people continue to come here and fall quiet. And so, dear listener, we return to where we began, standing with an old question in a northern landscape. What was this giant stone circle really for? Perhaps it was for gathering. Perhaps it was for ceremony. Perhaps it was for the sun and moon, for ancestors, for feasts, for alliances, for memory, for marking the year, for holding a community together beneath a changing sky. Most likely it was for several of these at once, because real human places are rarely simple. The Ring of Brodgar was not built to satisfy our categories. It was built to serve the needs of people whose world was full of stone, sea, sky, labour, loss, and return. If this journey through Orkney's ancient circle has brought you a little calm, a little wonder, or simply a quiet place to rest your thoughts, I would be grateful if you liked the video and subscribed to Just About Earth. It helps these slow walks through the deep past reach others who may also need a softer way to travel through history. And if you are still awake, perhaps take one last moment to imagine yourself standing inside the ring. No need to solve it. No need to name everything. Just the stones around you, the water nearby, the sky above, and the old circle holding its shape in the dark. The builders are gone, but the place remains. The ceremonies are gone, but the gathering continues in another form each time someone arrives, wonders, and listens. The Ring of Brodgar still does what ancient stones do best. It waits, it endures, it asks nothing quickly. And in the hush between the wind and the fading light, it reminds us that long before our clocks, roads, cities, and restless modern noise, people stood beneath the same sky and tried, with stone and memory, to make their place in the world last a little longer,